Chapter 1409. Huh. What good idea does fellow Taoist Xiao have? Hearing this, Kai Zhuoxia's heart was happy at first, but then she became a bit sad. The more tricks Xiaohua had, the less useful she would be, and the embryonic breathing pills she would get would naturally be less. Xiaohua didn't see Kai Zhuoxia's sadness and said with a smile, "Doesn't Yan Ganwei have a direct elder in Xuanyan School? If we find a disciple we're familiar with in Xuanyan School, wouldn't we also be able to find a famous pill master?" "I don't know Xuanyan School's disciples." Kai Zhuoxia shook her head. The disciples of the country of Xi's three major sects are all arrogant, not easy to get along with. My Luyang's Kai family's strength is small, simply not enough to enter their discerning eyes. Immediately, Kai Zhuoxia came to a realization. Could it be fellow Taoist Xiao knows Xuanyan School's disciples? But, ordinary disciples, I'm afraid they can't say anything. Kai Zhuoxia added somewhat worriedly. Is that so? Xiaohua also scratched his head and asked, then, what about 11th level qi refining disciples? Will they be useful? Great. Kai Zhuoxia heard and her face was somewhat happy. This cultivation level is just right. It's just enough. Xiaohua didn't understand and asked curiously, why? Fellow Taoist Xiao, the 11th level of qi refining is the most delicate period of the qi refining realm, and also the most crucial period. If a disciple of a cultivation sect breaks through to the 12th level of qi refining, they'll have divine sense, and with the foundation establishment pill, the cultivation level of foundation establishment should be within reach. Therefore, 11th level qi refining disciples are very sensitive in cultivation sections. No one knows if this disciple can break through to the peak of qi refining. If they really offend them, they might break through to foundation establishment, and it'll be difficult to avoid awkwardness when they meet in the future. Kai Zhuoxia's smile was like a flower as she explained, moreover, this embryonic breathing pill is the most useful for breaking through bottlenecks. Presumably, that Xuanyan School's 11th level qi refining disciple will also help fellow Taoist Xiao, right? Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart was also overjoyed. Kai Zhuoxia's words were extremely right. Could Xuanyan School's Zhuo Qingyuan reject this embryonic breathing pill delivered to his door? Even if Xiaohua didn't meet him in Jingbo City and he didn't send him a summoning talisman, Zhuo Qingyuan would still eagerly help. I wonder which disciple of Xuanyan School fellow Xiao is acquainted with. Should we rush to Xuanyan School right now? Kai Zhuoxia asked joyfully. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, I still have some things to do, so for the time being, I can't go. Kai Zhuoxia was stunned and whispered, then when can we go? It's hard to say, maybe a few days, maybe a few months. Xiaohua looked at the clear and cloudless sky and said, I want to cultivate in seclusion here, strive to break through to the 4th level of the aura refining realm. I don't know how long it will take. If fellow Taoist Kai doesn't want to wait here, you can go to other places. When I come out of seclusion, I'll send you a messaging talisman. When Kai Zhuoxia heard this, she inwardly nodded her head. Xiaohua had already reached the peak of the 3rd layer of the qi refining realm, so it was time for him to attempt to break through the bottleneck and step into the 4th layer of the qi refining realm in one go. If he really failed, then it wouldn't be too late to seek out the embryonic breathing pill. However, when Kai Zhuoxia broke through the bottleneck that year, the time she spent was calculated in years. If Xiaohua cultivated in seclusion here for several years, she couldn't always accompany him here, right? Therefore, Kai Zhuoxia thought for a moment and said with a smile, I can understand fellow Taoist Xiao's feelings, but the range of a messaging talisman is limited. If I'm too far away, I'm afraid fellow Taoist will find me. How about this, I will also cultivate nearby and wait for fellow Taoist for a while. If fellow Taoist still hasn't broken through, I will first return to Luyang's Kai clan. I haven't returned since I left for more than a year, so I'm somewhat worried. When fellow Taoist comes out of seclusion, how about we go straight to Luyang to find I? On the other hand, I can also introduce my younger sister to fellow Taoist Xiao. Great! Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, let's do as fellow Taoist Kai says. I've often heard fellow Taoist mention your younger sister, Fairy Hong Xia, so I'd like to see her. Soon after, the two of them each found a secret place and started to cultivate in seclusion just like before. Actually, in Kai Zhuoxia's heart, this kind of seclusion really wasn't necessary because it had only been a dozen or so days since they went into seclusion last time. If Xiao Hua could break through, he would have already broken through last time. Why wait until now? Moreover, based on Kai Zhuoxia's experience, since one encountered a bottleneck, one couldn't just cultivate in seclusion. One had to go out and travel to see if there were any fated chances. This time, Kai Zhuoxia's travels were exactly like this. She just happened to come across a foundation building pill, which allowed her to break through to the peak of the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. Of course, as for whether or not taking the foundation building pill was not worth the loss, it wasn't something Kai Zhuoxia could consider for the time being. Therefore, Kai Zhuoxia went into seclusion in the cave for 2 months before coming out. She prepared to return to Luyang's Kai clan first and bring back the foundation building pills and other items she obtained from Thousand Zhang Peak. With these foundation building pills, Luyang's Kai clan's overall strength might be able to rise by a level. This could also be considered Kai Zhuoxia's contribution to her clan. When Kai Zhuoxia came out of the cave, it was a sunny day. She squinted her eyes and looked at the blazing sun in the sky. She took a deep breath and used a flying talisman on her body. She didn't even look at Xiao Hua's mountain peak and directly flew in a certain direction. However, when Kai Zhuoxia leaped into the air and flew a few hundred feet, she suddenly heard Xiao Hua's voice behind her. Eh? Fellow Taoist Kai, why didn't you send me a summoning talisman after coming out of seclusion? Xiao Hua anxiously flew out from the mountain peak he was cultivating in seclusion and caught up with Kai Zhuoxia in a few breaths. Hee, so fellow Taoist Xiao came out of seclusion a long time ago. Kai Zhuoxia didn't turn her head and replied with a smile, it seems fellow Taoist Xiao. As she spoke, Kai Zhuoxia turned around. However, when she saw Xiao Hua, she couldn't help but be dumbstruck. She pointed her finger at Xiao Hua in disbelief and said, You're actually already in the early 4th layer of the qi refining realm? Xiao Hua's expression was as calm as the wind and clouds, as if this was an extremely unremarkable progress. He said with a smile, even if I'm in the 4th layer of the qi refining realm, I'm still only in the early stages of the qi refining realm. Compared to fellow Taoist Kai who's in the middle stages of the qi refining realm, there's still a huge difference. Kai Zhuoxia let out a groan. She almost resisted the shock in her heart and said, fellow Taoist Zhao's magic power in the 3rd layer of the qi refining realm is already stronger than the peak of the 5th layer of the qi refining realm. Wouldn't this early 4th layer of the qi refining realm be comparable to the 6th or 7th layer of the qi refining realm? Fellow Taoist, breaking through bottlenecks is as smooth as ordinary cultivation. Foundation establishment should be as easy as lifting a hand. That's right, Kai Zhuoxia definitely didn't expect that Xiao Hua would actually break through to the 4th layer of the qi refining realm in just 2 months. When she heard the noise earlier, she thought it was Xiao Hua coming out of seclusion in advance because he saw that things weren't going well. Not at all, foundation establishment is easier said than done. Thinking about Li Zongbao's abnormal state when he stepped into the foundation establishment realm, Xiao Hua's heart was filled with envy. However, he also knew that right now, he was only in the early stages of the qi refining realm. The distance between him and that realm wasn't just a tiny bit. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to be modest. Previously, I thought that apart from the disciples of the great cultivation sects, my younger sister was a person with outstanding talent. However, compared to fellow Taoist Xiao, my younger sister is still lacking by quite a bit. Kai Zhuoxia said with a bitter smile. Family members know family matters best. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Then, he looked in the direction Kai Zhuoxia was going and asked, fellow Taoist Kai, are you going back to Luyang? Yes, that's right. I didn't expect that fellow Taoist Xiao would come out of seclusion so early. I wanted to return to Luyang first. Then, what about now? Kai Zhuoxia's eyes flashed with a trace of passion as she said with a smile, since fellow Taoist Xiao has come out of seclusion, we naturally have to go to Xiunyan cult. I also want to quickly obtain the embryonic breathing pill so that I can quickly break through my bottleneck. Oh, that's right. Fellow Taoist Kai, apart from refining the embryonic breathing pill, does this mother-child spirit fruit have any other miraculous uses? Xiaohua suddenly thought of something and hurriedly asked. Other miraculous uses? Kai Zhuoxia stared blankly. I wonder what fellow Taoist Xiao knows. This. I also don't know. I just want to ask. Xiaohua said with a smile. This doesn't seem to have any other uses. Kai Zhuoxia thought carefully for a moment and shook her head. I also don't understand alchemy. These are all hearsay. Moreover, my Kai clan has never obtained the mother-child spirit fruit. I can't answer fellow Taoist's question. Oh. Xiaohua nodded and said, then forget it. Let's wait for another opportunity to ask other cultivators. It's still early. Fellow Taoist Kai, shall we depart? Of course. There are still several tens of days of travel from here to Xiunyan cult. How can we not depart early? Kai Zhuoxia smiled. Her figure unfolded and flew in another direction. At the same time that Kai Zhuoxia and Xiaohua set off for Xiunyan cult, in front of the hidden stone wall in the sobbing Meng Mountains, another mysterious cultivator arrived. This cultivator wore a camouflage robe. His face couldn't be seen and his cultivation couldn't be seen. This cultivator very familiarly landed in front of the stone wall. He patted his hand and took out several talismans from his storage pouch. Similarly, he struck them at various places on the stone wall. Then, he very easily struck out a spell seal, revealing the black hole behind the stone wall. That cultivator turned his head to look. Then, his figure flew into the black hole. After the cultivator entered, the stone wall also slowly closed up after he struck a spell seal. When that cultivator entered the space, he was also very careful. When he familiarly arrived at the place where Xiaohua picked the mother-child spirit fruit, he looked at the empty ground and couldn't help but be startled. After a long while, he let out a hoarse voice, as if he was talking to himself. Who would come here? Li Zongbao? Kai Zhuoxia? Or Xiaohua? They shouldn't know the secret of the nascent cultivating fruit. Oh, the mother-child spirit fruit. When this mysterious cultivator finished looking through the entire space, he sighed and said, Li Zongbao. Little vile spawn, you actually dared to spoil this old man's great plans. This old man has been waiting for this mother-child spirit fruit for many years. All this time, I haven't picked it. It was all for today. Who would have thought that this little bastard would take the initiative? If you want to pick it, just pick it. Why did you transplant so many of this old man's mother-child spirit fruit? Just based on your utmost happiness faction's methods, can you raise this mother-child spirit fruit? Chapter 14:10. Xiaohua and Kai Zhuoxia each flew up and activated their flying talismans, flying in the direction of Xiunyan school. As early as when he was at the peak of the qi refining stage, Xiaohua's flying speed was comparable to the peak of the qi refining stage. Now, needless to say, Xiaohua didn't move, leisurely following beside Kai Zhuoxia. When Kai Zhuoxia spoke to Xiaohua, it was obviously different from before. Her tone was a bit more respectful, but in her heart, she was a bit more curious. The bottleneck from the third level of the qi refining stage to the fourth level of the qi refining stage is admittedly not as difficult as the fourth level of the qi refining stage to the fifth level of the qi refining stage, but, after all, it is still a big leap. Kai Zhuoxia has never heard of a non-cultivation sect disciple who could smoothly cross the bottleneck in 2 months. Even her sister, who was already a genius in her eyes, used nearly half a year of bitter cultivation to enter the fourth level of the qi refining stage from the third level of the qi refining stage. The more Kai Zhuxia thought about it, the more she felt that Xiaohua's body was full of mystery, and the more she felt it was inconceivable. However, this kind of cultivation is a cultivator's biggest secret. Even within the same sect, they wouldn't reveal it, not to mention the relationship between Xiaohua and Kai Zhuxia. Xiaohua didn't know the location of Xuanyan school, but he also didn't ask much. Along the way, he chatted with Kai Zhuxia and learned a lot about the cultivation world in the country of Xi. Just a few times, Xiaohua deliberately led the topic to the Utopia faction and Li Zongbao, wanting to probe Kai Zhuxia's thoughts. Who knew that Kai Zhuxia would change the topic, as if she had never met Li Zongbao? Xiaohua smiled bitterly in his heart and didn't ask any more questions. This kind of thing all depends on fate. Admittedly, he knew some of Li Zongbao's intentions, but after all, he wasn't Li Zongbao, so many things were better left unsaid. On this day, while the two were flying, they suddenly saw a group of young men and women, about 10 people. The men had delicate features, extremely handsome, and the women had white teeth, red lips, almond-shaped eyes and rosy cheeks. They were incomparably beautiful. Moreover, the most shocking thing was that these 10 men and women were about 10 years old, but their cultivation levels were at the 7th or 8th level of the qi refining stage, which really made Xiaohua admire them. Even more surprising was the fact that these young cultivators were all wearing different clothes. It would appear that they were not disciples from the same sect. The fact that these young cultivators with high cultivation bases were chatting and laughing together was truly eye-catching. Xiaohua and Kai Zhuxia were also very careful on the way. Whenever they encountered people with higher cultivation than them, they would avoid them. They would even stand respectfully from a distance. They absolutely didn't want to provoke any trouble. This time was also the same. They saw these young men and women immediately stop in midair, waiting for these people to pass by them. Those young men and women were talking to each other, seemingly ignoring Xiaohua and the others. However, in the blink of an eye, they flew past them. Looking at everyone's receding figures, Xiaohua smacked his lips and said in a low voice, "Did you see that, fellow Taoist Kai? During this time, fellow Taoist has been talking about look at them, they're all in their teens and their cultivations have reached the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. They're real experts." Kai Zhuxia was also puzzled. She said, "These cultivators look young and their cultivation levels are high. However, they don't seem to be from a cultivation sect. Could it be that they are disciples of a cultivation family? But since they are disciples of a cultivation family, how can they be gathered together? Could it be that something happened in the cultivation world of our country of Xi? Oh. So they are disciples of a cultivation family." Hearing this, Xiaohua immediately understood. Cultivation families were second only to cultivation sections. Their disciples were nurtured with medicinal pills or secret techniques since they were young. It was reasonable for them to reach the 8th layer of the aura refining realm at such a young age. Ever since Kai Zhuxia left Jingbua City, she came to Thousand Zhang Peak and didn't go to Jingbua City again. Of course, she didn't understand what happened. Moreover, her Luyang's Kai clan could barely be considered a cultivation family. Even if something happened between cultivation families, they wouldn't inform her. Therefore, Kai Zhuxia was still lacking in this aspect. Let's go. They have their own matters and we have our own matters. Let's go about our own business. Xiaohua lacked interest in cultivation families and was too lazy to inquire. He only urged his magic power and flew away. Kai Zhuxia looked at the already disappearing figure and sighed slightly before following. However, the matter wasn't over yet. In the next few days, Xiaohua and Kai Zhuxia would encounter several groups of young cultivators every day. Moreover, each one was more handsome than the other and more gorgeous than the other. Xiaohua was almost dumbstruck. Fellow Taoist Kai, this cultivation family's disciples, are they all so outstanding? Xiaohua muttered in his heart, they are all so handsome, how can they still let others live, as he asked Kai Zhuxia. Kai Zhuxia laughed out loud. She covered her mouth and said, I'll let fellow Taoist Xiao know that anyone who can set foot on the path of cultivation is a dragon or phoenix among men. Not to mention their heavenly talent, even their appearance is rarely seen. Moreover, cultivation families attach the most importance to bloodline and family background. If their families aren't well matched, they absolutely won't form a marriage alliance. Fellow Taoist, think about it. How can people with this kind of bloodline not be heavenly talents? Even if there is a slight difference in cultivation aptitude, their appearance and temperament are 100 times stronger than ordinary people. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua somewhat understood, but he immediately asked curiously, fellow Taoist Kai seems to also be a member of a cultivation family. How? Xiao Hua's question was really indecent. However, he and Kai Zhuxia could be considered to have gone through several life and death situations, and their friendship was also not ordinary. Kai Zhuxia only blushed and covered her mouth, saying, I am an anomaly and can't be counted. Xiao Hua knew that he had misspoken and didn't dare to ask more. Just as he was about to urge the flight talisman, he heard Kai Zhuxia cry out in surprise, oh my, someone from Su Yenyun's family also came. Su Yenyun's family? Xiao Hua asked curiously, are they very famous? Kai Zhuxia's eyes looked into the distance, and her expression was somewhat strange. She said in a low voice, Qing Yang's Kai family and Su Yenyun's family, one is in the north of the country of Xi, and the other is in the south of the country of Xi. In the cultivation world, there is a saying that the Yun family is even more powerful than the Kai family. Look at the one in front of you. He's called Yun Guicheng, and he's said to be an unparalleled figure of the Yun family. Just as she was speaking, 4 young cultivators about the same age as Xiao Hua flew to the left of Xiao Hua and the others. The one in the lead had a tall and sturdy figure, with a tiger's back and an ape's waist. He wore a neat Taoist robe. When Xiao Hua saw him clearly, he couldn't help but feel jealous again. He saw that this person's face was fair and clean, and his appearance was like jade. In addition to his lacquer-like eyes and thick eyebrows, his entire body seemed to be without the slightest flaw. It was precisely the Yun Guicheng that Kai Zhuxia spoke of. This guy is the unparalleled Yun Guicheng of the Yun family. How could he look like this? Do they still want others to live? Xiao Hua muttered again. Yun Guicheng seemed to have also seen Xiao Hua and Kai Zhuxia, and a strange expression appeared on his face. His originally flying figure stopped, and he flew in front of Kai Zhuxia. He glanced at Xiao Hua, cupped his hands, and said to Kai Zhuxia, fellow Taoist Kai, I didn't expect to meet you here. It's truly an honor. As he spoke, his gaze looked to the left, as if he was looking for someone. Fellow Taoist Yun, what a coincidence. It should have been 3 years since we last met, right? I didn't expect fellow Taoists' cultivation to be so fast. You've actually already set foot into the high level of the aura refining realm. This is truly worthy of celebration. Kai Zhuxia's face was full of smiles again, and she cupped her hands in return. At this time, the 3 people behind Yun Guicheng also flew over. The 3 of them were 2 men and a woman, and they all looked to be in the 6th level of the aura refining realm. Moreover, their faces were all handsome and charming. The 3 of them flew over with surprise on their faces. The female cultivator whispered, Big brother, this fellow Taoist, who is he? Come, fellow Taoist Kai, let me introduce you. These 3 are disciples of the Yun family. The last time I went to the Kai family, they were still young, so they didn't follow me. They haven't met fellow Taoist yet. Yun Guicheng smiled and pointed to the female cultivator next to him. Her name is Yunlan. She's 16 years old this year, the same age as Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia. When Yunlan and the other 2 heard this, their faces were filled with anger. Without waiting for Yun Guicheng to finish his introduction, Yunlan waved her hand and said, Big brother, that's enough. Isn't she the disciple of the famous Kai family of Liang? I've heard of her long ago. Don't be rude. Yun Gui-chung scolded with a cold face. Isn't she? Yun Lan stiffened her neck and said, Big brother, what kind of person are you? So many young and beautiful female cultivators are fighting to marry Big Brother, but Big Brother doesn't like any of them. Instead, he likes Fairy Hong Xia from the Kai family of Luyang. She's not even a direct descendant of the Kai family of Qingyang. Why is she so precious? She actually rejected Big Brother and even said that she's still young, and that her priority is cultivation. She won't consider dual cultivation for the time being. Take a look at what the elder sister looks like, and how beautiful the younger sister can be. I'm afraid she rejected him because she doesn't dare to meet anyone. Yun Lan. Yun Guichong's expression changed drastically. He pointed to the distance and said, Go, stay there. Big brother. Yun Lan pouted and said unwillingly. The two of you, pull her over. Yun Guichong pointed to the two disciples beside him and said. The two disciples looked at each other and walked to Yun Lan's side. They gave her a look. Yun Lan looked at the anger on Yun Guichong's face and then looked at Kai Zhuxia's ashen face. She snorted and flew over with her magic power. After Yun Lan flew away, Yun Guichong quickly bowed and said, Fellow Kai, please don't blame her. Yun Lan has always been spoiled in the family. The most annoying thing is that she's extremely spoiled by the ancestors. We can't punish her. Here, I apologize to you. Kai Zhuxia smiled bitterly and bowed. She said it was fine. When the atmosphere eased a little, Yun Guichong smiled and said, Fellow Kai, Luyang's Kai family only sent the two of you here for the Huanhua sect's disciple recruitment. Your sister, Fairy Hong Xiao, didn't come. Huanhua sect's disciple recruitment. Kai Zhuxia was stunned. Could it be that fellow Kai didn't come here from Luyang because of the Huanhua sect? Yun Guichong was also very curious when he saw Kai Zhuxia in a daze. Kai Zhuxia shook her head. I came here because of other things. It's not because of the Huanhua sect. She then asked in confusion, doesn't the Huanhua sect recruit disciples every year? This year. Chapter 14:11. Kai Zhuxia asked curiously, doesn't the Huanhua sect accept disciples every year? Why is it so special this year? Why is it so grand? It seems that fellow Kai really doesn't know. Yun Guichong said with a smile, in the past, the Huanhua sect didn't have any restrictions on accepting disciples. Anyone who had some cultivation, even if they were in the first level of the qi refining realm, could participate. Of course, the disciples they accepted were either servants or apprentices. There were very few disciples who could cultivate directly. Even the servants and apprentices who were accepted only had more opportunities to improve themselves, but other than that, they were not as good as the cultivator families. Kai Zhuxia nodded with a smile and didn't say anything. She knew about this. However, this year is different. Yun Guichong paused and said with excitement, this year, the Huanhua sect released news that only cultivators in the fourth level of the qi refining realm were allowed to participate in the selection. Those below the fourth level of the qi refining realm were not allowed to participate. Why is that? Kai Zhuxia was stunned and then said with surprise, Is there something special? Yun Guichong looked around and glanced at Xiaohua. He said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, which family are you from? I don't look familiar. I'm afraid you're not a disciple of the Kai family. Xiaohua's face was as calm as water. He cupped his hands and said, I'm Xiaohua, a rogue cultivator. Greetings, fellow Taoist Yun. A rogue cultivator? Yun Zhicheng frowned slightly. He turned his eyes and looked at Kai Zhuxia. There was a hint of disdain in his eyes. However, the disdain was very faint and could not be detected by others. Yun Zhicheng then cupped his hands with a smile and said, So it is fellow Taoist Xiao. It is fate that we meet. Ha ha ha. Then, Yun Guicheng said to Xiao Hua with a smile, since fellow Taoist Xiao is not a disciple of the cultivator families, I'm afraid, you can't hear what I'm going to say next. If possible, please leave us alone. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned and then smiled bitterly. He didn't say anything and activated his magic power to fly away. Kai Zhuxia was not willing to let him go. She immediately called out, fellow Kai, please wait, what's the matter? Xiao Hua stopped. Fellow Taoist Yun, if you have something to say, then say it. Why did you ask fellow Taoist Xiao to leave? After fellow Taoist Yun leaves, I will tell fellow Taoist Xiao. If fellow Taoist Yun feels that it's inappropriate, then I won't listen. Kai Zhuxia said coldly. This. Yun Guicheng's face was slightly embarrassed. His gaze shifted between the two of them a few times as if he was deep in thought. However, Xiao Hua and Kai Zhuxia were both magnanimous, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. After a while, Yun Guicheng sighed and said with a smile, anyway, fellow cultivator Xiao will be a member of my family in the future. There's nothing wrong with saying it now. Kai Zhuxia opened her mouth, wanting to refute, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Yun Guicheng said in a low voice, according to a reliable source from my Yun family, the reason why the Huanhua sect is choosing disciples from cultivators above the fourth layer of the qi refining realm is because, the 3 cultivators selected this time can directly become the Huanhua sect's cultivation disciples. Ah! There's such a good thing. Kai Zhuxia was a little surprised. That's not all. If that was all, I wouldn't have to be so careful. Yun Zhicheng smiled and said, the most important thing is that the Huanhua sect has an elder in the gold core stage who has not found a suitable disciple to pass on his skills. Among the 3 disciples selected this time, one of them is the one who can inherit the mantle of this elder. Fellow Taoist Kai, isn't this a wonderful thing that fell out of the blue? A gold core cultivator. Kai Zhuxia was completely stunned. Then, she slapped her forehead and asked, this isn't a mistake, right? To be able to have a gold core cultivator as a teacher. Foundation establishment, should be easy. Hee, fellow Taoist Kai's words are a little naive, but if you think about it, it's not impossible. At least, you have a much higher chance of success than my family. Io, when is the Huanhua sect's selection? Kai Zhuxia suddenly shouted. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't worry. It's in 20 days. There's still plenty of time. Yun Guicheng said with a smile, if fellow Taoist Kai is willing, we can go together. But I don't know if my sister has received the news. Kai Zhuxia said anxiously, with eyes cultivation, even if I go, I'll be at the bottom. Why would I find trouble for no reason? In my family, only my sister is qualified. Yun Guicheng listened and nodded slightly, fellow Taoist Kai, you're right. I also thought that your sister was beside you. Then, he said with a smile, all the cultivation families in the country of Xi have received the news. The Kai family of Luyang must also know. And, if you don't know by now, even if fellow Taoist Kai wants to inform your family, I'm afraid it's not enough. Hearing this, Kai Zhuxia came to her senses and said with a bitter smile, faced with such a rare opportunity, I lost my sense of propriety. Excuse me. Perhaps your sister is already on her way. After 10 days, you can see her. Fellow Taoist Kai, do you want to go with us? Yun Guicheng suggested. Kai Zhuxia did want to go and have a look. She even wanted to try her luck. However, when she saw Xiao Hua smiling and not saying anything, she cupped her hands and said to Yun Guicheng, fellow Taoist Yun, thank you for your kindness. I's cultivation is too low. My sister will go with you. I have other things to do. Well, if that's the case, then goodbye. I have to go there as soon as possible. Yun Guicheng cupped his hands and said goodbye to Kai Zhuxia and Xiao Hua. Before he left, he looked at Xiao Hua meaningfully. Are you kidding me? Looking at Yun Guicheng's eyes, Xiaohua knew what was going on. He almost stomped his feet, but then he sneered and said to himself, "Humph, Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction is the one in your heart. Just wait and see. When the time comes, Li Zongbao will dig out your eyeballs." However, Xiaohua was stunned. Damn it, this guy likes not Kaizhuxia. Why does he care about Li Zongbao? Alas, this Li Zongbao is really something. Kaizhuxia has neither the man nor the beauty. Why does he like her? Just as Xiaohua was thinking about this, Kaizhuxia flew over and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please forgive me. Don't mention it." Xiaohua waved his hands quickly. What does this have to do with you? Alas, the relationship between the Kai family and the Yun family is hard to say. As the two of them walked, Kaizhuxia explained, "Back then, the Yun family suddenly came to our Kai family to propose marriage. It really made our Kai family flustered. Yun Guicheng's reputation, appearance, and talent are all first-rate. He is worthy of my sister. However, at that time, my sister thought that she was still young, and, she thought, she wanted to marry I first, so she was a little hesitant. However, at that time, the Kai family of Qingyang sent a family order that the Kai family of Luyang was not allowed to marry Su Yenyun. Otherwise, the Kai family of Luyang would be expelled from the family tree. Although this order was abrupt, the Kai family of Luyang could not disobey it. After all, even if the Kai family of Luyang were to marry Su Yenyun, they could not completely protect the Kai family of Luyang. Therefore, the Kai family had to use the reason of my sister's young age to refuse first." Kaizhuxia smiled bitterly. "Until last year, when I was about to go out for training, I found out that a female disciple of the Kai family of Qingyang wanted to have dual cultivation with Yun Guicheng. That's why the family order came about." "Oh, so that's how it is. This pretty boy is quite attractive." Xiaohua spat out. "Gigolo." When Kaizhuxia heard this, she was flabbergasted at first, but soon after, she laughed so hard that she almost bent over. Only after a long while did she straighten up, then she used her finger to point at Xiaohua, who was rubbing his nose and appeared to be very innocent, and said, "This guy is a 9th-level qi refining cultivator. If he's a pretty boy, then all the disciples of the cultivation aristocratic families would be powerless people." "Ha ha ha, gigolo. This is the first time in my life that I've heard someone say that about Yun Guicheng. Ha ha ha, is it that funny?" Xiaohua finally let out a breath and asked with a smile on his face. Although the encounter with Yun Guicheng was a small interlude, Kaizhuxia was obviously anxious for the next few days. Looking at her appearance, it was unclear whether she wanted to go to the Huanhua sect to see her so-called sister of Fairy Hongxia, or to try her luck at the Huanhua sect. In short, she was urging Xiaohua to hurry. Xuanyan school arrived 5 days later. From afar, they could already see a stretch of auspicious clouds lingering in the sky. Amidst the splendor, there were countless spirit birds flying up and down. It was like a fairyland. Xiaohua flew in the air and took a deep breath. The rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth hit him in the face. Xiaohua only needed to circulate his cultivation technique and traces of spiritual energy were sucked into his meridians. "Damn it, there's no mistake, right?" Xiaohua cursed again. "There seems to be some distance from here to Xuanyan cult. Why, is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth so rich? If you can cultivate here, how can your cultivation progress be slow?" Kaizhuxia covered her mouth and laughed. "Let me tell fellow Kai, this Xuanyan cult is located in one of the famous paradises in the country of Xi, Xuanyan Mountain. Not only is there a fire vein, there are also spiritual mines. Otherwise, this Xuanyan cult wouldn't have been one of the 3 great cultivation sects. Then the auspicious clouds, and splendor. Is it Xuanyan cult's protective array?" Xiaohua pointed to the distance and asked. "Compared to Jingbua City's protective array?" "It can't be compared." "It also can't be compared." Kai Zhuxia waved her hand and said, Jinghua City's strength might be able to challenge Xuanyan cult, but many people know of Jinghua City's 9 Flames 10,000 Winds Grand Array, and Heart Cleansing Grand Array. And this Xuanyan cult has existed much longer than Jinghua City. What this protective array is, extremely few people know. As for power, fellow Taoist, how do you think it can be compared? That's also true. Xiaohua scratched his head and was just about to speak when he heard Kai Zhuxia remind him. Fellow Taoist Xiao, we're about to fall. We can't fly forward anymore. What? This seems to be far from Xuanyan cult. Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously. Fellow Taoist Xiao really doesn't know. Kai Zhuxia smiled bitterly and said, you can't fly within 100 miles of Xuanyan cult. Cultivators who visit Xuanyan cult all have to wait in the guest pavilion. Sigh, isn't that so? Xiaohua also came to a realization. Flying was prohibited for a long distance in front of Jinghua City. One could only walk. This Xuanyan cult was naturally the same. The only difference was distance. Chapter 14:12. It's just, that's 100 miles. If we walk, how long will it take? Xiaohua was somewhat confused. Well, I'll let fellow Taoist Xiao know. Without waiting for Kai Zhuxia's explanation, a dark green brilliance flashed not far from their feet. Soon after, a magic tool that looked like a small boat flew out from the foothills. There were several cultivators standing on it, and it went straight to the place overflowing with extraordinary splendor 100 miles away. I understand. Xiaohua slapped his forehead, looked at Kai Zhuxia's smiling face, and said, loose cultivators, as expected, their knowledge is shallow. I've let fellow Taoist Kai see a joke. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't belittle yourself. Kai Zhuxia pointed at the foothills on the other side and said, let's go there first. When Xiaohua and Kai Zhuxia descended from the sky and turned around a mountain range and saw the guest pavilion built against the mountain, Xiaohua was even more dumbstruck. He originally thought that the guest pavilion was just a pavilion used to welcome guests, and presumably it would be similar to Shang Huaming's guest pavilion. And, at most, it would be a lot bigger. However, when he saw the large number of pavilions built against the mountain, which almost occupied the entire foothills, he was speechless. Was this still a pavilion? The most peculiar thing was that this large number of pavilions were all built with jade. They were divided into 3 floors, and each floor had a different color. Moreover, each floor had a different style. Xiaohua probably wanted to ask why the guest pavilion was divided into 3 floors, but just as he opened his mouth, a fiery red brilliance came from the side. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of the guest pavilion. It was a strange-shaped flying magic tool. Unlike Xiaohua and the others, that flying magic tool didn't stop and directly flew to the 2nd floor of the guest pavilion. Xiaohua understood that there were 2 foundation building cultivators on the flying magic tool. Alright, Xiaohua shut his mouth. Needless to say, this guest pavilion was divided by cultivation level. They were ore refining cultivators, so they could only go to the lowest floor. When the 2 of them were about 300 meters away from the pavilion, 2 boys with delicate features came up to them. They looked to be about 12 or 13 years old, but their cultivation bases were at the 5th layer of qi refining. The 2 boys smiled politely and cupped their fists. Xuanyan School's disciples, Ming Feng and Ming Cheng, greet senior brothers. May I know which sect you are from? What business do you have with my Xuanyan School? Kai Zhuxia and Xiaohua hurriedly returned the greeting. Kai Zhuxia smiled obsequiously and said, I am Kai Zhuxia, a disciple of Luyang's Kai family. I accompanied fellow Taoist Xiao to your esteemed sect for some private matters. The Kai family of Luyang. The eyes of Ming Feng, the boy at the front, turned slightly. He was somewhat puzzled as he asked, I wonder, what relationship does fellow Taoist Kai have with the Clear Yang Kai family? My Luyang Kai family is a branch of the Qingyang Kai family. Kai Zhuxia explained awkwardly. Oh, so it's like that. Ming Feng cupped his hands and said, I've heard a little about it. I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiaohua smiled and said, my name is Xiaohua. I'm a rogue cultivator. I'm here today, a rogue cultivator. Upon hearing that Xiaohua was a rogue cultivator, the other boy named Ming Cheng inadvertently frowned. He opened his mouth and interrupted Xiaohua's words, saying, fellow Taoist Xiao, my Xuanyan school doesn't have any dealings with rogue cultivators. I'm afraid we can't let fellow Taoist enter the pavilion. Please turn back, fellow Taoist Xiao. Ah! Xiaohua was stunned. He didn't expect that the Xuanyan school's boy wouldn't wait for him to say anything and would drive him away. For a moment, he was somewhat at a loss for words. Fellow Taoist Kai, although cultivator aristocratic families have relations with my Xuanyan school, it's still necessary for official business. If it's a private matter, only disciples at the 10th layer of qi refining and above have the qualifications to enter my pavilion. As for rogue cultivators, Ming Cheng shot a glance at Xiaohua and said, only foundation establishment cultivators can enter my pavilion. We brothers have never received rogue cultivators before. Please turn back, fellow Taoist Kai. Ming Feng said with a smile. These two boys spoke in a cultured and refined manner. Their manners were also refined and courteous. Presumably, they had received systematic training from Xuanyan school. However, every word they spoke was also soaked with disdain for cultivator aristocratic families and rogue cultivators. Everywhere they spoke was filled with the arrogance of cultivator sects superior to others. Fellow Taoists, we don't have any urgent matters. We just want to. Seeing this, Kai Zhuoxia hurriedly took half a step forward and said with a smile. However, she still didn't finish speaking. Ming Cheng waved his hand and said with a smile, since it's not an urgent matter, and it's still a private matter, please leave, fellow Taoists. But Kai Zhuoxia looked anxious. She wanted to say something, but a streak of light flew over from the distance and landed not far behind Xiaohua and company. It was a flying magic tool. Several disciples disembarked from the flying magic tool. They were all around the 10th layer of qi refining and wore the same attire. Seeing this, Ming Cheng and Ming Feng left Xiaohua and Kai Zhuoxia and quickly stepped forward. They smiled and cupped their hands, saying, so it's senior martial brothers from 7 Possibilities sect. May I know what business you have with our Xuanyan school? Hee, I came to pay a visit under the orders of my master. This is my master's token. The 10th layer disciple in front took out a token and handed it over. Ming Cheng took it and said with a smile, may I know which master's senior martial brother wants to visit? The disciple said his name. Ming Feng smiled and said, then I'll have to invite senior martial brothers to the guest pavilion for tea first. I'll send a message back to see if the master has time. Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist. The disciple cupped his hands and thanked him. Then, he looked at Xiaohua and Kai Zhuoxia and said casually, these two fellow Taoists. Ming Cheng smiled and said, one is a disciple from a cultivator clan and the other is an unknown rogue cultivator. Fellow Taoist, please follow me inside. The 7 Possibilities sect disciple looked down at Xiaohua with a disdainful smile on his face. He walked in with his head held high. The other disciples also looked down at him with disdainful smiles. Xiaohua's face was ashen. Kai Zhuoxia's face was also gloomy. After everyone entered, Xiaohua let out a long breath and said, let's go. We're not people that those famous sects want to see. But Kai Zhuoxia clenched her teeth and walked to Xiaohua's side. She said in a low voice, but we're asking them for help. Moreover, this isn't a big deal. The humiliation that my Luyang Kai clan suffered is far worse than this. Didn't you say that Su Yenyun clan wanted to form a marriage alliance with my Luyang Kai clan? That's just a leaf in the forest. Qingyang Kai clan alone can order me around, not to mention the 3 great sects of the country of Xi. Enduring humiliation will always be my cultivation clan's, way of survival. After Xiao Hua heard this, he stared at the guest pavilion in front of him for a long time. His expression softened and he snorted. Although a real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall, we cultivators are the most carefree. If it's not for transcendence, if it's not for freedom, who would give up their life and walk the path of cultivation? I'm just a loose cultivator. I can't stand the behavior of these great sects, so I don't care. Kai Zhuoxia smiled and said, there are good and bad people in cultivation sections. Zhuo Qingyuan, fellow Taoist Zhuo gave fellow Taoist Xiao the summoning talisman. Isn't that the proof? Him. Xiao Hua snorted again. He recalled Zhuo Qingyuan's palm strike at Jinghua City's E.G. He sneered and said, they're just jackals of the same tribe. If he was sincere, why would he give him a summoning talisman? Why didn't he tell him about this guest pavilion? Sigh, fellow Taoist Xiao, fellow Taoist Zhuo is already good like this. Fellow Taoist Xiao shouldn't misunderstand him. Kai Zhuoxia persuaded Xiao Hua, who wasn't clear about the matter between Xiao Hua and Zhuo Qingyuan. Xiao Hua knew Kai Zhuoxia's thoughts inside. How about I send out the summoning talisman? Don't do that. Kai Zhuoxia hurriedly waved her hand. Xuanyan School's guest pavilion is Xuanyan School's only contact with the outside world. If fellow Taoist Zhuo is in the sect, then he must pass through the guest pavilion. If fellow Taoist Xiao sends out a summoning talisman, let's not talk about whether the message can be sent in. Even if the message can be sent in, it will also implicate fellow Taoist Zhuo. This won't do, that won't do either. Then what should we do? Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, somewhat helpless. This Mingcheng and Mingfeng look cultured and refined, but we didn't even say our purpose in coming and we were rejected. Let's wait, Kai Zhuoxia smiled bitterly. We have a request, so we can only lower our posture. Xiao Hua was helpless and could only accompany Kai Zhuoxia to stand guard in front of Xuanyan School's guest pavilion. Unknowingly, 3 days passed very quickly. In front of Xuanyan School's guest pavilion, there were many cultivators coming and going. Some came to visit, some Xuanyan School's disciples went out on business. The guest pavilion's disciples also appeared many times, but everyone turned a blind eye to Xiao Hua and Kai Zhuoxia. They only swept a few glances and ignored them. At first, Xiao Hua still had some hope. When he saw the guest pavilion's disciples, he still took a look. Later, he simply closed his eyes and stood there, immersing his mind into space and carefully comprehending the heavenly Tao's ascension realm. And at the same time, the dragonization art, nameless mnemonic chant and so on in his body were also slowly cultivated. Looking at Kai Zhuoxia again, her face was filled with anxiety. But in these 3 days, every time she saw the guest pavilion's disciples, she would greet them with a smile. Even if they ignored her, she would still smile and nod as a greeting. On this day, the sun had just risen. Several groups of Xuanyan School's disciples went out again. Kai Zhuoxia finally couldn't bear it anymore. She walked in front of Xiao Hua and said, "Forget it, fellow Taoist Xiao, what? Enduring humiliation doesn't work anymore?" Xiao Hua opened his eyes and said very calmly, "Actually, if you want to endure humiliation, you might as well go directly to the utmost happiness faction." Hearing the utmost happiness faction, Kai Zhuoxia's expression changed. Just as she was about to open her mouth, a cultivator around the 8th level of the qi refining stage walked out from the guest pavilion. That cultivator walked straight in front of Kai Zhuoxia and asked, "Fellow Taoists, you've been waiting at my Xuanyan school for a long time. Do you have any important business?" Hearing this, Kai Zhuoxia's face was filled with joy. She cupped her hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, please no. The two of us have come to pay a visit to fellow Taoist Zhuo Qingyuan. Fellow Taoist, please pass on the message. Senior Martial Brother Zhuo Qingyuan." That cultivator was slightly dazed. Why didn't fellow Taoist say so earlier? Nonsense. Xiao Hua at the side sneered in his heart, "I also need to have a chance to say it." Hee hee, Your honorable school has a lot of business. We don't dare to disturb small matters. If fellow Taoist has free time, please help pass on the message. Kai Zhuxia smiled obsequiously. She clapped her hands and several mid-grade spirit stones were handed over. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it. Chapter 14:13. That cultivator's eyes swiveled, and he slightly tilted his body to take a look. With a flick of his big sleeve, he put away the spirit stone without leaving a trace and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, you're too polite. If you said this earlier, I would have already sent a message. Why wait until now?" Xiao Hua glanced at Kai Zhuxia and was truly speechless. "Ha, I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist," Kai Zhuxia said with a smile. "Do you have any proof?" That cultivator nodded and asked. "Here." Xiao Hua understood and handed Zhuo Qingyuan's summoning talisman over. "Yes, it's indeed Senior Martial Brother Zhuo's summoning talisman." "Wait a moment." That cultivator took the summoning talisman and looked at it for a moment before handing it back to Xiao Hua and instructing Xiao Hua to wait a moment. He then directly returned to the guest pavilion. When that disciple entered the guest pavilion, Xiao Hua said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Kai, since the spirit stone was useful, why didn't you take it out a few days ago?" Kai Zhuxia curled her lips and also replied in a low voice, "I did want to take it, but who would I give it to? If this disciple didn't come out and ask, even if you wanted to hand it over, I don't know if he'd be willing to accept it. If one didn't meet his expectations, we wouldn't even have the chance to stand here. Since this disciple came out and asked, that means he could give it to me. That's why I dared to hand over the spirit stone. Sigh, it seems like we should have tested Mingcheng and Mingfeng a few days ago when we met them. Maybe, who knows? Maybe this disciple is Mingcheng and Mingfeng." Just as Kai Zhuxia was speaking, that disciple walked out from the guest pavilion and shouted, "Fellow Taoists, please wait a moment. Senior Martial Brother Zhuo just happened to have something to do and will be here soon." Kai Zhuxia and Xiao Hua were both delighted and cupped their hands, saying, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." At this time, the two didn't care about the matter of the spirit stone. Sure enough, after a cup of tea's time, Zhuo Qingyuan came out from the guest pavilion. Seeing Xiao Hua, he was very shocked and frowned, appearing somewhat displeased. He cupped his hands, saying, "I was wondering which sex fellow Taoist, so it's fellow Taoist Xiao." "Fellow Taoist Xiao, what business do you have?" "I still have some official business within the sect, fellow Taoist, please make it short." When Xiao Hua heard this, he rolled his eyes. Listening to the meaning of these words, it was as if he was the one who was begging for money, making the other party feel annoyed. But Xiao Hua still restrained his temper, cupped his hands, and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Zhuo, I have something good to discuss with fellow Taoist." "Good news?" Zhuo Qingyuan was slightly stunned. He nodded and said, "Tell me about it, fellow Taoist." "This is Luyang's Kai family's Kai Zhuxia, fellow Taoist Kai." Xiao Hua pointed at Kai Zhuxia and introduced her. "Oh, fellow Taoist Kai, I greet you." Zhuo Qingyuan cupped his hands in greeting, but soon after, he seemed to have thought of something and pointed at Kai Zhuxia. "Fellow Taoist Kai, you look very familiar." Then he thought for a while and said, "I remember. 1 year ago, I seem to have seen fellow cultivator Kai in the Jingbo city. At that time, fellow cultivator Kai seemed to be with fellow cultivator Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction." Kai Zhuxia had a strange expression on her face as she nodded slightly. "Hee, fellow Taoist Kai, where is fellow Taoist Li? I have admired fellow Taoist Li for a long time, but that day, I was leading the disciples of the faction to gain experience and had no time to meet fellow Taoist Li." Zhuo Qingyuan's face was immediately filled with a smile. "Fellow Taoist Li only stayed in my country of Xi for a few days. Because of some matters in the faction, he rushed back to the Utopia faction." Kai Zhuxia slightly gritted her teeth and replied, "Io, it's really a pity. Fellow Taoist Li is at the peak of the qi refining stage. I still wanted to meet fellow Taoist Li and ask for advice on cultivation. Zhuo Qingyuan couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Fellow Taoist Zhuo, I'll let you know. Xiaohua's eyes turned, and he said with a smile, before fellow Taoist Li returned to the Utopia faction, he had already broken through to the Foundation establishment stage and became a senior at the Foundation establishment stage. Ah! Li Zongbao, finally, broke through. Zhuo Qingyuan's eyes widened, and he said in astonishment, Senior. Senior Li is really a weirdo. Zhuo Qingyuan followed this with a sigh. Senior Li has advanced to the Foundation establishment stage. I don't know, when will I be able to catch up to Senior Li's cultivation? Kai Zhuoxia glared at Xiaohua, somewhat dissatisfied that Xiaohua revealed Li Zongbao's cultivation. But after listening to Xiaohua's words, she immediately understood Xiaohua's painstaking efforts. Xiaohua said, Actually, I came here today precisely because of this matter. Fellow Taoist Xiao, how do you explain this? Zhuo Qingyuan said with envy and amazement. It's like this. Xiaohua said with a smile, Senior Li and fellow Taoist Kai obtained an item in Jingbo City's E-City. On it, there's news of the mother-child spirit fruit. Mother-child spirit fruit? Zhuo Qingyuan's face lit up when he heard this, and he said urgently, Where can I find this mother-child spirit fruit? Fellow Taoist Li, don't be anxious. I came here with fellow Taoist Kai precisely because of this matter. Xiaohua said unhurriedly, after obtaining the news of the mother-child spirit fruit, Senior Li and fellow Taoist Kai searched for that clue to find the mother-child spirit fruit. However, fellow Taoist Kai's cultivation is limited. Senior Li was worried that fellow Taoist Kai would encounter danger, so he had fellow Taoist Kai wait in a safe place. As a result, when fellow Taoist Kai saw Senior Li again, Senior Li was already a Foundation establishment stage senior. Then, what about the mother-child spirit fruit? Zhuo Qingyuan asked urgently, is Senior Li's advancement related to the mother-child spirit fruit? Kai Zhuoxia also understood and said with a smile, I don't know about this. I can't ask too much about this sort of thing. Oh, so it's like that. Zhuo Qingyuan was somewhat disappointed. Although I don't know whether Senior Li's advancement is related to the mother-child spirit fruit or not, Senior Li left the mother-child spirit fruit to I. Kai Zhuoxia continued. Ah. The mother-child spirit fruit is with fellow Taoist Kai. Zhuo Qingyuan was pleasantly surprised again. Yes, it's with I. Kai Zhuoxia nodded. I don't know where Senior Li went, but when he brought the mother-child spirit fruit back, he told I that the Utmost Happiness faction had an urgent matter that required him to return to. Moreover, he had just stepped into the Foundation establishment stage and needed to return to the Utmost Happiness faction to meet with his teacher. Because of some reason, he left one of the mother-child spirit fruit for I. And I also couldn't find an alchemist who could refine the embryonic breathing pill, so when I met fellow Taoist Xiao, I knew that fellow Taoist Xiao knew fellow Taoist Zhuo, so I asked fellow Taoist Xiao to bring I to see fellow Taoist Zhuo. Oh. Zhuo Qingyuan understood and said with a nod, so that's how it is. I felt that this embryonic breathing pill must be useful to fellow Taoist Zhuo, so I rashly came to visit fellow Taoist Zhuo. I hope I didn't disturb fellow Taoist Zhuo. Xiaohua said with a smile. Sigh, it can't be considered a disturbance. It's rare that fellow Taoist Kai still thinks of I. Zhuo Qingyuan was a bit ashamed. He thought for a moment and asked, I understand the two fellow Taoists' intentions. However, if you ask the alchemist in my Xuanyan school to refine the pill, even if I step forward and say that I want to use it myself, the alchemist will still have to keep 30% of the medicinal pills for himself. As for I, to tell the truth, this mother-child spirit fruit is hard to find. I also want to keep 10%, so I can only return the remaining 60% to the two fellow Taoists. I wonder. When Kaixuxia heard this, her face was overjoyed and she promptly said, "Fellow Taoist Zhuo is so righteous, how can you only keep 10%? It's better to take 20%. Zhuo Qingyuan shook his head and said, "I accept fellow Taoist Kai's kindness. I only need to take 2 of these embryonic breathing pills. The alchemist I know can refine 24 or 30 embryonic breathing pills in 1 cauldron. This 10% is enough." Then many thanks, fellow Taoist Zhuo. Kaixuxia cupped her hands in thanks and then gave Xiaohua a look. You're welcome, you're welcome. I also benefited from the 2 fellow Taoists. Zhuo Qingyuan returned the greeting. Following this, Xiaohua handed over the mother-child spirit fruit. Zhuo Qingyuan looked at it and very cautiously put it away in his storage pouch. But immediately, Zhuo Qingyuan suddenly thought of something and said somewhat hesitantly, "But I have to go out on official business in the sect and can only return after a month. At that time, I can handle the matter of the embryonic breathing pills. I wonder if the 2 fellow Taoists say so earlier." Xiaohua unhappily rolled his eyes. At this time, the mother-child spirit fruit had already fallen into someone else's storage pouch. It would be somewhat difficult to get it back. Sure enough, Kaixuxia's expression also slightly changed and she forced a smile and said, "We'll listen to fellow Taoist Zhuo's arrangements. We'll only take the embryonic breathing pills. Everything will depend on fellow Taoist Zhuo. But the 2 of you please rest assured. The matter of refining the pills should be completed within half a year. The 2 of you can just come over at that time." Zhuo Qingyuan said with a smile. "Okay, I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Zhuo." Xiaohua could only say, "I will come to find fellow Taoist Zhuo again after half a year. And then I won't send you off. I still have to make a trip back and properly put away this mother-child spirit fruit." Zhuo Qingyuan cupped his hands in farewell and was just about to leave when Xiaohua thought of another matter and said, "Oh right, fellow Taoist Zhuo, is fellow Taoist Xiao Mao in the sect?" Xiao Mao. Yes, but because of the matter in Jingbo City, he's currently facing the wall and reflecting on his mistakes. I'm afraid he won't be able to see fellow Taoist Xiao. Zhuo Qingyuan looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile. "Oh, I don't want to see fellow Taoist Xiao." Xiaohua smiled and took out that jade pendant from the space and handed it over, saying, "This jade pendant is something that I obtained by chance in Yi City. It should be an old item that fellow Taoist Xiao is concerned about. I have no use for it. Please pass it to Xiao Mao, fellow Taoist Zhuo." Jade pendant? Zhuo Qingyuan was stunned and received it very astonishingly. He looked carefully and nodded, saying, "It's precisely this jade pendant. This is something that Xiao Mao's mother left behind. It has a special meaning to Xiao Mao, which is why he lost his composure in Yi City. Fellow Taoist Xiao is truly considerate. It's nothing. It's just a small matter." Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "Farewell." Xiaohua and Kaixuxia cupped their hands and bid farewell to Zhuo Qingyuan. They prepared to turn around and fly away, but they saw Zhuo Qingyuan raise his hand and call out to the 2 of them again, "Fellow Taoists, please wait a moment." "Is there something else, fellow Taoist Zhuo?" Xiaohua asked curiously. Fellow Taoist Xiao is so warm-hearted, making I feel very moved. Since fellow Taoist Xiao treats my Xuanyan school's disciples like this, then I should also take out a little something. Zhuo Qingyuan said with a smile, "I also have a message for the 2 of you." Xiaohua was puzzled, but Kaixuxia said with a smile, "Please guide us, fellow Taoist Zhuo." This humble Taoist has descended the mountain this time precisely to send a message to a few cultivation aristocratic families. My Xuanyan school is in urgent need of some fire essence flame crystals. If anyone can find sufficient fire essence flame crystals, my Xuanyan school will repay them with an equivalent amount. Chapter 14:14. In the air, Xiao Hua and Kai Zhuoxia's figures streaked across the horizon at an extremely fast speed, causing the continuous sea of clouds to tremble. Within the pure white clouds, an azure passageway instantly appeared. When the figures were far away, the wind and clouds surged, and the gap that was created was slowly covered up. As the figures flew extremely far away, they heard Kai Zhuoxia say with a smile, "Thanks to fellow Taoist Zhuo's dual flying talisman. Otherwise, with eyes flying speed, I'm afraid we wouldn't even be able to cover half the distance. We definitely wouldn't be able to make it to the rinsing flower sect selection tomorrow." "Shu," Xiao Hua said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Kai, don't be too loud. There seems to be a cultivator with profound magic power ahead. We'll have to slow down." Alas, fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation is indeed more profound than I's. I still haven't sensed it. I also have a feeling, so I can't take it seriously. However, for safety's sake, we'd better slow down a bit. In any case, this place is already very close to the rinsing flower sect. We'll definitely arrive before noon tomorrow, right? And, that's right. Kai Zhuoxia said, "You and I should fly separately." As they spoke, the two of them separated, and their flying speed was clearly much slower. Sure enough, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, a faint white brilliance appeared on the left in front of the two of them. It rapidly flew over their heads. It was an old man wearing white clothes, with a slightly green face and a brandy nose. Foundation Establishment Cultivator. The old man's faint divine sense swept over the two of them. Xiao Hua's heart trembled, and he hurriedly bowed in salute, respectfully standing in midair. The old man seemed to not have seen the two of them at all. His figure didn't stop, and he flew over their heads. In the blink of an eye, he became a black dot, no longer visible. Only after the old man flew far away did Kai Zhuoxia straighten up. She looked in the direction the old man flew and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, your flying speed seems to be not much slower than a Foundation Establishment senior." Xiao Hua's expression slightly changed, and he waved his hand, saying, "Fellow Taoist Kai is too kind. With I's cultivation, how could I dare to compare with a Foundation Establishment senior? It's really the difference between cloud and mud." Then, he smiled and said, "By the way, the fire marrow flame crystal that fellow Zhuo mentioned earlier. What exactly is it and where can I get it?" Pfft, Kai Zhuoxia covered her mouth and laughed. "I thought fellow Taoist Xiao already knew, so I didn't ask him about it the whole way. Now that we're about to reach Washing Flower Sect, you finally asked." Xiao Hua didn't hold back and curled his lips. "I have always been the first to ask. However, wasn't there someone who was in a hurry to participate in some selection and wanted to see his sister? That's why he was in a hurry and didn't have a chance to ask." Kai Zhuoxia smiled and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Taoist Xiao." Then, he sighed, "Alas, actually. I know that my chances are very small, but I still want to try." Could it be that fellow Taoist Xiao did not see it? Xuanyan school only had 2 boys, yet they were already so arrogant. They were only at the 5th layer of qi refining. Then look at fellow Taoist Zhuo Qingyuan. He's not much older than I, but he's already at the 11th layer of qi refining. Moreover, he's going to send a message to a cultivator aristocratic family, one that's even more powerful than my Kai clan. If this poor Taoist can enter the Rinsing Flower sect and become a disciple of the Rinsing Flower sect, then, not only will this poor Taoist's cultivation level increase, even my Kai family's status will increase. We won't have to live under the Qing-Yang Kai family's nose and mouth anymore." Then, he looked at Xiao Hua again and persuaded, "Actually, fellow Taoist Xiao probably understands even more than I that there is a great disparity between a sect and a wandering cultivator. If possible, fellow Taoist Xiao might as well participate in Washing Flower sect selection this time. I think that with fellow Taoist Xiao's methods, you'll definitely be able to rank in the top 3. Xiao Hua's heart stirred when he heard this. Shang Huaming's life and the life of a wandering cultivator for over a year were truly completely different. Right now, although he had the dragon transformation art, the nameless mnemonic chant, and other cultivation methods to cultivate, he was still lacking in the most important foundational cultivation methods and medicinal pills. If he couldn't solve these two problems, he could only hover around the fifth layer of qi refining. It was impossible for him to reach foundation establishment. But within a cultivation sect, these two problems weren't a problem. As long as he took medicine like usual and cultivated like usual, his cultivation would steadily increase. More importantly, whether it was the dragon transformation art, the nameless mnemonic chant, or even the heaven ascension realm, not only did they not have any conflict with foundational cultivation methods, they even had supplementary effects. If he could enter a cultivation sect, he would definitely have a smooth journey and become outstanding. Hee, how is it? Fellow Taoist Xiao, what I said wasn't wrong, right? Seeing that Xiao Hua was muttering to himself in silence, Kaizhuxia smiled and said, if fellow Taoist Xiao becomes a brilliant disciple of Rinsing Flower sect in the future and becomes a foundation establishment senior, don't forget my reminder today. Fellow Taoist Kai's cultivation is also profound. Tomorrow, your wish will definitely be fulfilled. Xiao Hua replied with a smile. Sigh, where did I get my hope from? I only went to Washing Flowers sect to cheer for my younger sister. As long as my younger sister can enter Washing Flowers sect, as her elder sister, I can be at ease. Kaizhuxia smiled bitterly. Kaizhuxia repeatedly mentioned Fairy Hongxia, causing Xiao Hua to be filled with curiosity towards this person whom he had never met before and whose name resounded like thunder in his ears. That's right, fellow Taoist Kai, after talking for so long, I still haven't said anything about this fire essence flame crystal. Fellow Taoist, could it be that you also don't know? Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and asked. Kaizhuxia smiled and covered her mouth, fellow Taoist Xiao is right. I really don't know where this fire essence flame crystal is. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes in annoyance and said, I also didn't think that you would know. If fellow Taoist Kai knew where it was, how could Xuanyan school not know? How could the cultivation families in country of Xi not know? Why would they need Zhuo Qingyuan to offer a reward? I just want to know what this fire essence flame crystal is and what it's used for. Kaizhuxia seemed to have already known Xiao Hua's reaction and didn't care at all. She smiled and said, I also only know that this fire essence flame crystal is an extremely rare fire attribute spirit stone. It's an extremely bewitching red color and is about the size of a thumb. As for what it's used for, I don't know. However, although I don't know where this fire essence flame crystal is, I've seen it in the ancient records of my Kai family. This fire essence flame crystal is a type of crystal that is even more precious than a top-grade fire crystal. In the past, there was once a cultivator who occasionally obtained a small piece from the magma of Melting Fire Valley. Top-grade fire crystal. Bewitching red color. The size of a thumb. When Xiao Hua heard this, a strange expression appeared on his face. His eyes turned slightly and just as he was about to speak, he saw that Kaizhuxia's face was also filled with joy. She pointed her finger and said, quickly look, fellow Taoist Xiao. The mountain range with beautiful flowers over there is where Washing Flowers sect is located. Is that so? Xiao Hua also raised his head. Sure enough, far in front of them, there was a continuous mountain range with many gorgeous colors. This color was different from the brilliance of Xuanyan school. It was the color of real flowers. Looking at it from afar, that mountain range looked like a large cluster of bright flowers. Washing Flowers sect really lives up to its reputation. Xiao Hua praised and unconsciously increased his speed. The two of them walked for another half a day. The Washing Flower mountain range was already in sight. They saw a large river flowing down from the top of the mountain range. Countless flowers spiraled in the river and flowed down with the river. There was an indescribable poignant beauty to it. Kaizhuxia said in a low voice, fellow Taoist Xiao, this is the place where Washing Flower and Sword is done. Let's land. Washing Flower and Sword. Could it be that this is also a place where washing flower sect can't fly? Xiao Hua said with a smile. And, that's right. Although Kai Zhuxia was a cultivator, her current state of mind was very easily affected by the scene before her eyes. It was very abnormal and she could only speak in a somewhat mournful voice. Fellow Taoist Kai, is there something wrong? Xiao Hua heard the uneasiness in Kai Zhuxia's tone and asked in a low voice. No, there's nothing wrong. Kai Zhuxia forced a smile and used her hand to point at the flowers in the river and said, the beautiful flowers only exist on the branches, but they don't last long. The falling petals move with the waves, but perhaps they will remain for a moment. Today, the branches are home, but in the future, I don't know where the grave of flowers is. Everyone says that the falling petals are willing, but the flowing water is heartless. However, they don't know that the flowing water is powerless like the branches of flowers to retain the brilliance of the falling petals. It can only do its best to take the falling petals far away, breaking away from the eyes of the secular world and sending the falling petals on their final journey. Kai Zhuxia's words were inexplicable and incoherent. Xiao Hua opened his eyes wide and looked at the flowing water, then at Kai Zhuxia. He really didn't understand what she was saying. Just when Xiao Hua wanted to ask Kai Zhuxia a question, Kai Zhuxia patted her storage pouch and blinked her already moist eyes. She forced a smile and said, I want to see if my younger sister is here. As she spoke, she used her magic power and the fiery red messaging talisman flew into the air. However, the messaging talisman's brilliance slightly circled in the air and directly fell down, not flying far away. Oh. Could it be that my younger sister didn't come? Kai Zhuxia was surprised and exclaimed in a low voice. Or, is she somewhere the messaging talisman can't reach? Xiao Hua whispered. Maybe. Kai Zhuxia slightly shook her head. She had a bad feeling in her heart. Xiao Hua smiled and said, how about we talk after crossing the river? Presumably, the Huanhua sect also has people to receive her. When we get there, we can just ask. Kai Zhuxia turned her head to look. On the other side of the river, among the clouds of flowers, a corner of a four-cornered pavilion could be seen. Forget it. If my younger sister comes, then she comes. If she doesn't, then I can't do anything even if I'm anxious. I can't bear to see the self-righteous faces of those cultivation families. Let's wait until tomorrow morning. Kai Zhuxia shook her head and said, contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations. This, of course. Xiao Hua nodded and said with a smile. Immediately, the two of them found a place to cultivate nearby and adjusted their breathing. On the morning of the second day, Kai Zhuxia and Xiao Hua arrived at the location of the four-cornered pavilion. Sure enough, from far away, they saw several male and female children wearing plain white robes respectfully guarding there. When they saw Xiao Hua and Kai Zhuxia, one of the female children with picturesque features took a few steps forward and cupped her hands in salute, saying, two fellow Taoists, have you come to participate in my Huanhua sect selection? Good, she's really a beauty. She's so young and already looks so much more charming than this Kai Zhuxia. When she grows up, what will happen? Xiao Hua looked at the female child who was only 12 or 13 years old but had a cultivation level of the fourth layer of qi refining. Unexpectedly, she was about the same as him. Chapter 14-15. Kai Zhuxia seemed to be used to this. She cupped her hands in return and said, I am Luyang's Kai family's Kai Zhuxia. I came to participate in the selection. Is there anyone else from my Kai family? Luyang's Kai family. The girl slightly frowned and thought for a moment before saying, as far as I know, there are only two people from Qingyang's Kai family. I've never heard of any Kai family from Luyang. So it's like that. Kai Zhuxia nodded with a face full of disappointment. This fellow Taoist? Is he also from Luyang's Kai family? Did he also come to participate in the selection? The girl ignored Kai Zhuxia's disappointment and glanced at Xiao Hua. Oh, I am Xiao Hua. I'm a loose cultivator. I also came to participate in the selection. Xiao Hua hurriedly cupped his hands and answered. Loose cultivator. Participate in the selection. The girl stared blankly and said with some surprise. What? Loose cultivators can't participate? Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat and he hastily asked. The girl seemed to have realized her own inappropriateness. Her face was a bit red and she repeatedly waved her hands, saying, No, this selection didn't say that loose cultivators were not allowed to participate. It's just that in the previous selections, there were loose cultivators every time. But this time, because the requirement is the 4th layer of qi refining and above, I really didn't see any loose cultivators. Fellow Taoist Xiao is the first one. I was just a bit surprised. Xiao Hua was stunned at first, but he soon understood. Previously, there was no requirement for cultivation. 1st and 2nd layer qi refining could participate. Loose cultivators generally had low cultivation. The other cultivators who came to participate in the selection certainly didn't have high cultivation. Loose cultivators might have a chance. But this time, the requirement was only the 4th layer of qi refining and above. The disciples from cultivation families were all in the 7th or 8th layer. Moreover, there were disciples like Yun family's Yun Jicheng who were in the 9th layer of qi refining. Under these circumstances, the chances of a loose cultivator were absolutely slim. Why would a loose cultivator come? I'm afraid I'm going to be rebuffed. Xiao Hua bitterly smiled and thought to himself. He said, then. I seem to be overestimating myself. The girl pursed her lips and smiled. Whether you participate or not is up to you, I have no right to interfere. However, fellow Taoist Xiao isn't the first to participate. Even if you participate, what's the matter? There are other 4th layer qi refining cultivators participating as well. Xiao Hua was stunned. That's right. The little girl smiled. All right then, I will also participate. Xiao Hua nodded. The little girl raised her hand and said, Fellow Taoists, please follow I. This way please. As soon as the girl's voice fell, a medium-height cultivator with a somewhat sallow face quickly walked over from behind Xiao Hua and the others. A handsome boy beside the girl quickly went up to greet him. Xiao Hua only glanced at the cultivator, then followed Kaizhuxia behind the little girl and walked towards the pavilion in the 4 corners. Just as he took 2 steps, he heard the cultivator behind him say, I am Lu Chongqi, a loose cultivator. I have come to participate in the washing flower sex selection. Rogue cultivator. Xiao Hua was delighted in his heart. The little girl in front of him was also stunned. Just like Xiao Hua, she turned her head to look at this 5th level qi refining loose cultivator. On the contrary, Lu Chongqi was calm and collected. When he saw Xiao Hua and the little girl turn their heads to look at him, he only smiled and nodded in response. Xiao Hua also nodded at him, then turned his head and followed the little girl into the pavilion in the 4 corners. The pavilion in the 4 corners looked very small, but as soon as he stepped into the pavilion, Xiao Hua was stunned to discover that there were already several tens of male and female cultivators inside. Some of these people were standing and whispering, some were sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed in cultivation. However, it didn't seem crowded at all. Spatial magic. Xiao Hua looked around and secretly praised in his heart, as expected of the washing flower sect. It's just a pavilion in the 4 corners used to welcome guests, yet they need to use spatial magic. This grandeur isn't much inferior to Xuanyan school. Just as Xiao Hua was sizing up his surroundings, 2 beautiful women with disdain on their faces quickly walked over. Upon seeing this, Xiao Hua was somewhat stunned. He looked them up and down in puzzlement. These 2 don't seem to know each other. Could it be that they were subdued by this young master's temperament? Do they want to come up and make friends? Then I have to hold back a little. I don't want to lose the bearing of a loose cultivator. Kaizhuxia. I haven't seen you for a few years, but you haven't changed at all. The female cultivator in front had a mocking smile on her face as she shrieked from afar. Ah! So it's Kai Zhuoxia's old acquaintance. Xiao Hua's haughty attitude immediately collapsed and he resumed his lazy expression. Isn't that so? In a small place like Luyang, little sister Zhuoxia's face is still lacking in both qi and blood these past few years, looking like a village girl. How can people still look at her? I remember that when little sister was young, she wasn't like this either. How come after she grew up, she became more and more unbearable? In the future, how can she find a dual cultivation partner? The other woman also laughed and said, if little sister Zhuoxia's matter isn't resolved, how can our Kai family's little sister Hongxia, who is known as Fairy Hongxia, find a marriage alliance? If we don't have a marriage alliance, wouldn't Luyang's Kai family forever be a burden to the village? This woman's words were very harsh, causing Xiao Hua to frown. Kai Zhuoxia's face had already turned green, but she still cupped her hands in a manner that was neither haughty nor humble. Zhuoxia greets elder sister Yingxia and elder sister Yuxia. Dispense with the formalities, dispense with the formalities. This is the Rinsing Flowers sect, there's no need for the formalities of my Kai family. Kai Yingxia waved her hand and said very casually. Kai Yuxia's beautiful eyes rippled as she glanced at Xiao Hua and said, little sister Zhuoxia, this little loose cultivator, why don't you introduce him to elder sister? I'm afraid, his cultivation is too shallow, and he doesn't dare to meet people. Little loose cultivator. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. Since they exposed Xiao Hua as a loose cultivator, then these two people must have heard Yun Jicheng's words. Since they heard Yun Jicheng's words, they must know his name as well. This kind of ridicule was somewhat bullying. How could Kai Zhuoxia not know? She helplessly glanced at Xiao Hua and said, this is fellow Taoist Xiao Hua. I met him in Jingbo City. Because of some matters, we traveled together. Little sister Zhuoxia, aren't you going to be secretive? You're already so old, this kind of thing, what's there to be embarrassed about? He's only a loose cultivator. It's nothing. If he comes to our door, the cultivation method of your Luyang Kai family can also guarantee him a 7th level qi refining cultivator. Shut up. Xiao Hua's face was covered in frost. He took a step forward and coldly berated them. Kai Yingxia and Kai Yuxia were only at the 7th level of qi refining. Xiao Hua dared to kill them, so how could he be afraid of these two female cultivators? Rebel, rebel. Seeing this, Kai Yingxia's almond-shaped eyes turned vertical. She also berated loudly, you're only from a branch family of my Luyang Kai family. What qualifications do you have to speak so loudly in front of me? Moreover, you haven't entered my Kai family yet. I only need to use my little finger to take your life. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Seeing this, Kai Zhuoxia immediately pulled Xiao Hua's sleeve and said in a low voice, for I's sake, don't take these words to heart, Xiao Hua's gaze was like a knife. It coldly swept across Kai Yingxia and Kai Yuxia's faces. The two of them were also startled. They never thought that a little loose cultivator at the 4th level of qi refining would have such a frightening gaze. Kai Yuxia also took a step forward and shouted, what are you looking at? Do you believe that I won't dig out your eyeballs right now? Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed loudly. I want to see what tricks you have. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Kai Zhuoxia implored, placing her body between the two of them. Who's making such a racket? With a loud shout, a 10th level qi refining cultivator stepped into the four-cornered pavilion. That cultivator was followed by the loose cultivator called Lu Chongqi from earlier. I'll let fellow Taoist know. This is my Kai family's family matter. Seeing this, Kai Yingxia immediately said with a smile. That cultivator coldly said, I don't care if you're from the Kai family, the Chao family, or the Hua family. This is my Wanhua sect. You're making a racket here. You're losing face for my Wanhua sect. If you say another word, I'll kick you out of the pavilion. Fellow Taoist Mo, they're sisters from the Kai family. We haven't seen each other for a long time, so they've talked a lot. Don't blame them, don't blame them. Yun Xiaocheng appeared out of nowhere and cupped his hands with a smile on his face. Oh, fellow Taoist Yun. That disciple surnamed Mo saw Yun Xiaocheng's expression soften. He said, fellow Taoist, look after them. They're all middle-level qi refining cultivators. Why are they acting like mortal women and causing trouble the moment they see each other? Kai Yingxia and Kai Yuxia's faces were slightly red, and they lowered their heads in embarrassment. They looked like virtuous ladies. Kai Zhuxia also lowered her head and sighed slightly. Seeing Kai Zhuxia like this, Xiaohua unconsciously understood. He snorted through his nose and didn't say anything. Fellow Taoist Lu, feel free to stay here. Wait for a while. When noon comes, we'll go to the selection area together with the other fellow Taoists. That disciple surnamed Mo waved his sleeve and said to the loose cultivator. Yes, I'll listen to Senior Mo's instructions. Lu Chongqi respectfully bowed and said. That disciple surnamed Mo raised his head and looked at everyone in the pavilion. Then, he quickly walked out of the pavilion through another passage. Fellow Taoist Kai, you've finally come. Yun Xiaocheng had a warm smile on his face as he cupped his hands and said. My Luyang's Kai family didn't send anyone. Kai Zhuxia forced a smile and cupped her hands in return. This. Yun Xiaocheng glanced at Kai Yingxia and Kai Yuxia, but didn't answer. Kai Yingxia sneered and said, it's enough for us two sisters to represent our Kai family. What's the use of sending someone from your Luyang's Kai family? They're just there to serve as a foil. It's fine if they don't come. When Kai Zhuxia heard this, she knew that her younger sister hadn't received news that the Cleansing Flower sect was recruiting disciples. She could only sigh in her heart and ignore the two of them. She walked to the side alone and sat down with her eyes closed. When Yun Xiaocheng saw this, he cupped his hands in salute to Xiaohua. He also walked to a corner and sat down. Xiaohua also smiled. He coldly glanced at Kai Yingxia and Kai Yuxia, then walked to Kai Zhuxia's side. He stood with his hands by his side and looked around. Kai Yingxia and Kai Yuxia also glared at Xiaohua fiercely, then walked back to their seats. For a time, there were only a few dozen people whispering in the pavilion. After Xiaohua and Kai Zhuxia came in, many other cultivators came one after another. Looking at their appearance, they all came in groups of 2s and 3s. When it was almost noon, there were actually nearly 200 people gathered in the pavilion. Chapter 14-16. Seeing more and more people gathering in the pavilion, Xiaohua couldn't help but mutter to himself, cultivator aristocratic families really aren't small. Seeing these people in 2s and 3s, they should be from the same aristocratic family or aristocratic families that are on good terms with each other. The most important thing is that these aristocratic family disciples all have cultivations above the 7th level of qi refining. Although this rinsing flower sect's requirement is the 4th level of qi refining, disciples with slightly weaker cultivations didn't come. Compared to Tian Qi's group of loose cultivators, they really can't be mentioned in the same breath. Oh, I heard there's also a 4th level qi refining disciple like I who came to participate in the selection. I wonder who it is. Although the cultivators in the pavilion can use magic to check each other's cultivation level, there are still a lot of people. It is impossible for Xiaohua to find the 4th layer qi refining cultivator among them. On the contrary, the 5th layer qi refining loose cultivator, Lu Chongqi, is standing not far from Xiaohua. He is also looking at Xiaohua with interest, seemingly also aware of Xiaohua's identity as a loose cultivator. Seeing Xiaohua looking at him, Lu Chongqi took 2 steps forward with a smile on his face and said in a low voice, I'm Lu Chongqi, greetings fellow Taoist Xiao. Oh, fellow Taoist Lu is too polite. Xiaohua promptly returned the greeting and said with a smile, does fellow Taoist have any instructions? Fellow Taoist Xiao. Le Chongqi glanced at Kai Zhuoxia and said in a low voice, "Today, those attending the rinsing flower sex selection are all disciples of cultivator aristocratic families. As for us loose cultivators, there's only the two of us. I think that the two of us should join hands. Although I'm a few years older and my cultivation is a bit higher, I am willing to advance and retreat together with fellow Taoist Xiao." Xiaohua smiled in his heart and said in a low voice, "Thank you for fellow Taoist Li's intentions, but I have a question for you." "Please speak, fellow Taoist Xiao." Le Chongqi smiled and nodded, "I will tell you everything I know." "Good." Xiaohua clapped and said, "If the two of us only have one chance, who does fellow Taoist Lu think it should go to?" "This." Le Chongqi only smiled slightly and said, "There are 3 chances in this selection. If the two of us join hands, there won't be only one chance." "Of course. I can give up this one and only chance." After hearing these pompous words, Xiaohua became more and more unconvinced. He smiled and shook his head. "I know my own cultivation level very well. I have no intention of passing any selection at all. This time, I only came to accompany a familiar fellow Taoist. I appreciate fellow Taoist Li's kindness. All right. I wish fellow Taoist Xiao good luck." Le Chongqi was a little disappointed, but he still cupped his hands with a smile. When Le Chongqi looked around to find other people to help him, Kai Zhuoxia opened her eyes slightly and said in a low voice, "Loose cultivators are so shameless. If you want to make use of others and make them work for you, just use your mouth." Halfway through, Kai Zhuoxia suddenly realized something. She covered her mouth and laughed. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't blame me. I wasn't talking about you." Xiaohua shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I know." Kai Zhuoxia rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Before today, perhaps fellow Taoist Xiao was still a loose cultivator, but after today, I'm afraid that might not be the case. Others don't know fellow Taoist Xiao's magic power, but I know it clearly. There are almost 200 people in this pavilion. I'm afraid fellow Taoist Xiao can enter the top 10. With a bit of luck, there shouldn't be a problem." Xiaohua smiled faintly and didn't answer. He was now in the early stage of the 4th layer of the aura refining realm, and his magic power had greatly increased. If he really used his full strength in a life and death battle, Xiaohua was confident he wouldn't necessarily lose to an 8th layer aura refining cultivator. As for 9th layer aura refining cultivators like Yun Jichong, how many of them were there? While they were talking, a male and a female rinsing flower sect disciples walked into the square pavilion. These two people both had cultivation levels around the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. The male had bright eyes and white teeth, extremely handsome, and the female had peach cheeks and starry eyes. In addition to her fine eyebrows, she was truly charming. Everyone only took a glance and secretly praised them in their hearts. "Fellow Taoists." The male disciple cupped his hands and said, "Our sect's selection of disciples will now begin. Please follow I." "Yes, thank you, fellow Taoist." Everyone returned the greeting. Immediately after, the male disciple didn't say his name and turned around very indifferently. As for the female disciple, she didn't say a single word and turned around to leave. However, her figure was quite graceful, attracting the gazes of many male cultivators. Xiaohua and Kai Zhuoxia walked at the back. Even the loose cultivator Le Chongqi found a seemingly honest aristocratic family disciple to walk in front of them. Kai Zhuoxia looked at Le Chongqi's back and said in a low voice, "That 7th layer aura refining disciple is from Shaonan's Qing clan. He looks mature, but he's actually full of evil tricks. As a fellow loose cultivator, I'm afraid you're in a bit of trouble." Xiaohua snorted through his nose. Loose cultivators struggle in the shadows. What kind of world haven't they seen? If it weren't for the fact that cultivation level growth is a problem, loose cultivators wouldn't necessarily be any worse than cultivator aristocratic families. Kai Zhuoxia shrugged and didn't continue speaking. After exiting the square pavilion, they saw a boat-shaped magic tool in front of them. It was emitting a faint multicolored brilliance. "Fellow Taoists, please go, I'll send you over." The male cultivator waved his hand. A multicolored brilliance flew out from the magic tool and landed in front of him. It was precisely a path of light formed by the brilliance. This scene was admittedly strange, causing Xiao Hua's eyes to brighten. However, the others were, after all, disciples of aristocratic families. They were all knowledgeable, so they weren't too surprised. One by one, they walked onto the path of light. That path of light slowly moved. Everyone didn't need to walk, the path of light sent everyone onto the flying boat. Once everyone boarded the flying boat, the male and female disciples flew onto it. They took out a yellow talisman from their bosoms and stuck it on their bodies. Soon after, they took out a palm-sized jade plate. Using their magic power, they pointed their fingers upwards. That boat-shaped magic tool slowly rose, circled around a bit, then flew towards a certain place in the Huanhua mountain range. The flying boat was very stable. Xiao Hua looked to his left and saw that there was no one nearby. He asked in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Kai, can't this magic tool only be controlled by people with divine sense? Their cultivation level has to be at least at the peak stage of the aura refining realm. This Huanhua sect disciple is only in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. I'm afraid he doesn't have divine sense, so how can he control it?" Kai Zhuxia smiled and said, "That's true, but there are far more cultivators below the peak stage of the aura refining realm than there are cultivators above it. There are many things that aren't certain. Moreover, they don't dare to trouble these seniors, so all the cultivation groups came up with their own methods. For example, those who control flying magic tools can refine special yellow talismans. Coupled with enough magic power, they'll be able to use it." "Oh, so it's like that." Xiao Hua understood. He had a magic tool from Huanling sect in his space, but he had always been puzzled. He couldn't understand how those two disciples, who were clearly only in the 6th layer of the aura refining realm, could use it. Why couldn't he control it? It seemed like it was a secret technique of their cultivation group. Not long after, the flying boat descended and landed on a large mountain full of colorful flowers. Everyone disembarked from the flying boat and stood in the open space. The male cultivator swept his gaze over everyone again, then said in a clear voice, "This is the back mountain of my Huanhua sect. It's several hundred meters high and has a radius of more than 10 li. For the sake of this selection, I specially placed 3 robin birds in this mountain. Whoever can catch them will pass this selection." Boom! Everyone burst into an uproar and began to discuss in low voices. They'd thought of many methods, but they'd never imagined that they'd be using the method of catching birds. "Shut up!" The female cultivator coldly berated, "You're all disciples of aristocratic families. Why are you so unruly?" When everyone heard her, they immediately shut their mouths. The male cultivator clapped his hand and took out a stack of yellow talismans from his storage pouch. He said, "This selection will end tomorrow at noon. During this time, it doesn't matter if you live or die. Whoever holds a robin bird in his hand at this time tomorrow will be the winner of this selection. Of course, all of you fellow Taoists are disciples of aristocratic families of cultivators and have a very long relationship with my Huanhua sect. My Huanhua sect also has to consider your safety. These are yellow talismans specially made by my Huanhua sect. Once activated with magic power, you'll be transported to a safe place in my Huanhua sect. Of course, activating these yellow talismans means that you've given up on this selection. Please be careful." As he spoke, the male cultivator waved his hand and the yellow talismans flew into the hands of Xiao Hua and the others, one for each person. Xiao Hua cautiously received them. These were life-saving items. I still have 2 points to mention. First, there are only 3 robin birds, and they must be alive. If one dies, there'll be one less chance. Second, the robin birds can't be transported through the transfer formation. Alright, fellow Taoists, take care. I'll be back here at this time tomorrow. The male cultivator cupped his hands and boarded the flying boat with the female cultivator. Activating magic power, they flew away and disappeared. After the Huanhua sect disciples left, everyone looked at each other and flew down the mountain in different directions according to their previous agreement. Yun Guicheng wasn't far from Kai Zhuxia. He glanced at Kai Zhuxia and walked over with a smile. Fellow Taoist Kai, it's very dangerous here. Fellow Taoist Kai. Are you willing to travel with I? Thank you for your kind offer, fellow Taoist Yun. I'll look for it myself. Kai Zhuxia refused just like before. Well, then fellow Taoist Kai, take care of yourself. Yun Guicheng didn't seem surprised. He glanced at Xiao Hua and directly flew down the mountain with his disciples. Fellow Taoist Xiao. After Yun Guicheng flew far away, Kai Zhuxia turned her head and said, shall we also act separately? Separate? Xiao Hua was a little surprised. If there's a robin bird in front of you and me, fellow Taoist Xiao, do you think I'll have a chance? Kai Zhuxia smiled. This is true. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead. Just like how he wasn't willing to cooperate with Lu Chongqi, Kai Zhuxia was also the same. In front of absolute temptation, no one could guarantee that they wouldn't have any selfish motives. He wouldn't harm Kai Zhuxia's life, but Kai Zhuxia absolutely couldn't take the robin bird away in front of him. Well, fellow Taoist Kai is right. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, however, fellow Taoist Kai, please tell me what this robin bird looks like. Hee, I knew that fellow Taoist Xiao might not have seen it before. Kai Zhuxia smiled and said, this robin bird is a strange bird. It's only the size of a thumb and its entire body is emerald green. Although it can't be classified as a spiritual bird, its flying speed is extremely fast, comparable to the seventh layer of the qi refining realm. Of course, this isn't the most peculiar part. This robin bird is naturally timid and very sensitive to spiritual aura. As long as a cultivator is cautious, it will immediately run away. And if it can't escape in time, it will even change the color of its body according to the surrounding situation. Chapter 14-17. There's such a strange bird. After listening to Kai Zhuxia's description of the robin, Xiao Hua's original ambition had already turned into a pool of cold water. First of all, this robin could change its color according to the surrounding environment. This was absolutely not something an aura-refining cultivator without divine sense could casually discover. Not to mention that the robin was only the size of a thumb, and its flight was very fast. Freely shuttling back and forth in this several dozen li mountain range, this kind of difficulty was not much lower than finding a needle in a haystack. After cupping his hands and bidding farewell to Kai Zhuxia, Xiao Hua was too lazy to fly and slowly walked down on foot. While breathing in the intoxicating fragrance of the flowers, he secretly calculated. Needless to say, it was really unrealistic for Xiao Hua to catch the robin himself. However, that Huanhua sect disciple had clearly said that there would be no casualties. Moreover, whoever could obtain the robin by noon tomorrow would be the winner of the selection. In other words, Huanhua sect didn't care how you obtained the robin. Xiao Hua didn't have the ability to catch the robin, but he had the ability to snatch it from the hands of others. Apart from those aristocratic family disciples at the 9th and 8th level of aura refining, he temporarily didn't have much certainty. As for the other cultivators at the 7th level of aura refining and below, as long as Xiao Hua was careful and caught them off guard, he had a 70 to 80% certainty. With a plan in mind, Xiao Hua also became even more unhurried. Being busy first wasn't being busy. Right now, he should give time to those cultivators who could catch the robin and let them do their best. Only then would it be time for Xiao Hua to display his skills. As for Kai Zhuxia, after leaving Xiao Hua, she activated her magic power and flew along a faintly discernible path in the forest for a while. Soon after, she suddenly flew up into the air and looked around. At this time, everyone had already disappeared and it was extremely quiet. Kaizhuxia first looked at the peak where Xiao Hua was and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm really sorry. This kind of opportunity is really something that I have been looking forward to for a long time. It's not that I don't want to share it with fellow Taoist, but the revival of my clan is all on my shoulders." While speaking, Kaizhuxia clapped her hands and an old yellow talisman appeared in her hand. She activated her magic power and a small, faintly visible red-crowned crane was formed from the yellow talisman. That red-crowned crane lightly danced in the air, its two faintly discernible wings flapping from time to time. Kaizhuxia's face emitted a happy radiance and she said to herself, "This spirit-seeking talisman, although it has been a long time, it can still be used. If I hadn't taken it out on a whim before leaving, wouldn't this trip to Huanhua Sec's trip to be a failure?" While speaking, Kaizhuxia clapped her right palm on her chest. Immediately, a drop of blood from her heart flew out from her mouth and landed on the red-crowned crane's head. When the red-crowned crane received the blood from Kaizhuxia's heart, a bit of cinnabar immediately appeared on its head. The red color of the cinnabar immediately spread to the red-crowned crane's body. Not long after, the entire red-crowned crane was filled with faint traces of blood, and Kaizhuxia's face became even paler. Quick, Kaizhuxia recited a spell and tapped the red-crowned crane's head with her hand. The red-crowned crane let out a soft, "ga" sound. The sound wasn't loud, but it was very loud in Kaizhuxia's ears. The red-crowned crane spread its wings and flew towards a direction halfway up the mountain. Kaizhuxia's face was filled with joy. She performed another spell and followed closely behind. The disciples of aristocratic families were indeed the disciples of aristocratic families. Even a side branch of an aristocratic family like Kaizhuxia had tricks that Xiaohua didn't know about, so there was no need to talk about other people in detail. Looking at Yun Guicheng from the Yun family, 4 people from the Yun family had come, but for some reason, only 3 people had appeared. Yun Guicheng only said a few words of courtesy to Kaizhuxia before he took the 2 of them into the air. Seeing that many disciples of aristocratic families were flying in different directions, the female disciple curled her lips and said disdainfully, "What a bunch of idiots." "Yun Guicheng scolded, "I let you come out this time to broaden your horizons. Why are you so talkative? Big brother." The male disciple also smiled and said, "Sister Lan is right. These disciples don't have the profound cultivation of Big Brother. Even if they catch the robin, won't they still be Big Brother's prey? Ha, Big Brother, even Yun Feng is speaking for me. Am I right?" Yun Guicheng glanced at the 2 of them and smiled slightly. He said in a low voice, "You only know that our Yun family has tricks up our sleeves. How can we not have others? These cultivator aristocratic families may not have disciples with higher cultivation than your big brother, but they all have a foundation. Don't underestimate them. Having a high cultivation is the way of the king. Who's afraid of that?" Yun Lan smiled and said, "At worst, Big Brother can go on a killing spree and kill all 200 disciples of aristocratic families. I'd like to see if I can find the robin." "Nonsense. You're bringing disaster to our Yun family." Yun Guicheng looked around and scolded her in a low voice. Hee, I'm just saying. This kind of thing. I know." Yun Lan pursed her lips and smiled. She looked very charming. "Big brother, are we going to use our tricks?" Yun Feng asked. Hee, of course. Our Yun clan is in an advantageous position right now. We can seize a robin bird at lightning speed. Not only can we reduce the sin of killing, but we can also intimidate the other disciples. Maybe we can even get a second robin bird. Yun Jicheng said without hesitation. "Thank you, Big Brother." Yun Lan said with a smile. "Big Brother, can't we get 3? Yun Feng was a little unhappy. "How is that possible? This second one might not even be possible." Before Yun Guicheng could say anything, Yun Lan began to lecture Yun Feng. I know, Sister Lan. Yun Feng stuck out his tongue. He was just a teenager. Yun Lan was very proud. She patted her storage bag and took out a yellow talisman. She handed it to Yun Feng and said with a smile, don't flatter me. If there's a second robin, I'll let you have it. Now, let's hurry up and help Big Brother get the first robin. Yes, Sister Lan. Yun Feng immediately became serious. He patted his hand and took out an old yellow talisman. He calmly placed it in his hand. Seeing that Yun Lan and Yun Feng were ready, Yun Guicheng patted his hand and took out a magic weapon that looked like a spinning top from his storage bag. With a poof, Yun Guicheng spat a mouthful of life origin energy on the spinning top. The spinning top began to spin. Seeing that the spinning top was moving, Yun Lan and Yun Feng did not dare to be negligent. They activated their magic power and injected it into the yellow talisman. The yellow talisman immediately turned into a shiny thin piece. The two of them opened their mouths and swallowed the thin piece. As soon as the thin piece entered their mouths, their faces gradually turned red, as if they were going to bleed. Then, they looked at each other and bit the tip of their tongues at the same time. A mouthful of blood was spat out and landed on the spinning top. After the spinning top received the 2 mouthfuls of blood essence, it suddenly shone brightly. Then, it spun faster and faster. It was almost impossible to see its original appearance. Seeing the spinning top's brilliance expand and contract, Yun Guicheng sighed and said, my Yun family's spirit seeker has been useless for many years. Who would have thought that today, instead of searching for spirit beasts, it would only be used to search for robin? Yun Lan's face was pale and he looked a little dispirited. He also sighed and said, according to the family records, when my Yun family was at its peak, we used this spirit seeker to search for spirit beasts protecting the family. This magic weapon requires the blood essence of at least 2 members of the Yun family's direct bloodline. It consumes a lot of vitality. Today, after testing it, it really lives up to its name. 2 cultivators of the 5th level of Qi refining like us can't even activate the spirit seeker. Poof! Yun Guicheng also spat out a mouthful of blood essence. The spinning brilliance made a sizzling sound like boiling oil being poured into boiling water. The brilliance scattered in all directions and turned into many tiny lights. These lights also spun. After a while, these tiny lights suddenly turned into tiny arrowheads. They suddenly gathered together and turned into a slightly larger arrowhead, pointing in one direction. Let's go. Seeing this, Yun Guicheng's face lit up with joy. He pointed his finger and the arrowhead turned into a ray of brilliance and shot into the distance. Yun Guicheng, Yun Lan, and Yun Feng also became spirited. They activated their flying talismans and flew down the mountain. The Kai family of Luyang did so, the Yun family of Su Yan did so, and the other families also used their own methods and shot in different directions. Although the disciple of the Huanhua sect had clearly said that there were only 3 robin birds here, the direction they were heading in was more than 10. As for who was right and who was wrong, only they would know. Throughout the entire mountain, besides Xiao Hua, a 4th-level Qi refining cultivator, who was strolling leisurely, there was another 4th-level Qi refining cultivator on the other side of the mountain. He looked about 13 or 14 years old and was also sitting on a rock. He coldly looked at the people flying in the air and disappeared. There was not the slightest trace of nervousness on his face. It was as if this selection had nothing to do with him. As for Kaizhuxia, after following the red-crowned crane for a few li, the red-crowned crane gradually slowed down. The flapping of its wings also weakened. When she looked at the red-crowned crane again, it was gradually becoming transparent and was about to disappear. Seeing this, Kaizhuxia felt a little helpless. She clapped her hand again and another drop of blood from her heart flew out and landed on the red-crowned crane's head. The red-crowned crane seemed to have taken a blood-replenishing pill. Its wings flapped again and its head shook slightly. Then, it flew down the mountain and into a slightly dark place. Kaixuoxia was secretly delighted. Looking at the situation in the shade, she slapped her storage pouch and took out a few yellow talismans. She was just about to fly down. But at this moment, a few sounds of something breaking through the air rang out not far away. When Kaixuoxia turned her head, she saw the rogue cultivator Lu Chongqi and the disciple of the Qing family, Qing Ming, as well as a few other 7th-level qi refining cultivators. Oh no! Kaixuoxia's heart turned cold when she saw these people. How could a lone wolf fight against these tigers and wolves? In a hurry, Kaixuoxia was still a little reluctant. She clenched her teeth and fiercely flew into the forest, quickly chasing after the red-crowned crane. Sure enough, under the dark shade of a tree, a jade-like robin was flapping its small wings and hovering above a withered branch. On that withered branch, there was a jade-like spirit fruit. Kaixuoxia was overjoyed. She didn't care about her figure. She fiercely urged her transcendence energy and flew like a flying sword towards the robin. As she flew, she slapped her storage pouch. Chapter 14:18. The robin's beak was extremely sharp and long. It was hovering in front of an emerald green spirit fruit, piercing its beak deeply into the spirit fruit as if it was sucking the juice inside. There were a few withered branches above the spirit fruit, and between the branches was a tattered spider web. Broken strands of spider silk fluttered in the wind. Just as Kaixuoxia saw the robin and was about to slap her storage bag, she saw a fist-sized, black-haired spider suddenly appear from above the tattered spider web. The spider crawled rapidly along the spider web. When it reached the center of the spider web, which was right above the robin's head, a strand of black spider silk emerged from the spider's abdomen and silently pierced towards the robin. The spider silk was silent and fast. In the blink of an eye, Kaixuoxia had already closed in on the robin's wing. However, at this moment, the robin's body suddenly moved horizontally and dodged the spider silk. Then, without a pause, it turned into a thin green line and flew in another direction. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Kaixuoxia's hand had just slapped her storage bag. She gritted her teeth. That was Kaixuoxia's only thought. She didn't stop and continued to fly past the spirit fruit. But at the same time, she took out a fireball talisman from her storage bag. With a wave of her hand, she hit the spider and the broken spider web. With a boom, the spider and the spider web were burned to ashes by the fireball. Then, Kaixuoxia sighed and hurriedly flew away in a different direction from the robin. The requirements for her spirit-seeking talisman were very high. Not only did it require cultivation, but it also required blood essence. It could only be used 3 times a day, and Kaixuoxia had to rest for a while before she could use it a second time. Kaixuoxia temporarily retreated, and Lu Chongqi and Qing Ming followed her. When they saw the emerald green spirit fruit and the remaining burn marks on the withered branches, Qing Ming said angrily, "Could it be that someone beat us to it?" Lu Chongqi smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Cheng, this emerald green spirit fruit is the emerald juice fruit that the emerald cicadas like to eat. I'm sure the emerald cicadas were here just now. If there was a fellow Taoist who got it first, he definitely wouldn't have used a fireball talisman. From the looks of it, some spirit beast must have disturbed that fellow Taoist who was trying to capture the emerald cicadas, causing the emerald cicadas to flee." Spirit beast? Qing Ming's expression didn't change as he whispered, "There aren't any powerful spirit beasts in the mountain behind the rinsing flower sect, right?" "Huh, fellow Taoist Cheng, don't worry. How could there be a powerful spirit beast in the mountain behind the rinsing flower sect? The robin only flies fast, it still has a lot of nemesis." Lu Chongqi had a smile on his face, but a trace of contempt flashed through his eyes. "Oh, that's good, that's good." Qing Ming repeatedly applauded. "I don't want to run into any spirit beasts instead of catching the robin. Fellow Taoist Cheng, the robin has already flown away." Presumably, there are already fellow Taoists chasing after it. Should we hurry up and use our secret skills? Otherwise, there are only 3 robin in this mountain. If one is caught, we'll have one less chance. Okay, fellow Taoist Lu, please wait a moment. Cheng Ming said and patted his hand to take out a yellow jade slip from his storage bag. He handed it to the disciple behind him and ordered, "You guys, spit out a little of your natal true essence." The Cheng family disciple behind Cheng Ming took the jade slip and spat out a mouthful of true essence. The jade slip gradually emitted a yellow brilliance. The brilliance rotated slightly on the jade slip and flickered a few times in the direction the robin had flown before it was annihilated. Good, it's in that direction. Cheng Ming was overjoyed. He took the jade slip and said with a smile, "The family's spiritual movement is really useful." Lu Chongqi's face was filled with envy. He smiled and said, "That's right. This is also why I need to rely on you, fellow Taoist Cheng. Please help me get the second robin after you get the first." Well said, well said. Let's go. Cheng Ming smiled and flicked his sleeves. Everyone chased after him. At the same time, on the other side of the foothills, Yun Jicheng, Yun Lan, and Yun Feng followed the arrow-like brilliance and flew down the mountain. The brilliance was indeed driven by the essence and blood of the 3 people. It was much more powerful than Kai Zhuoxia's spirit-seeking talisman. After flying for several miles, it did not slow down. It did not stop until it reached the side of a gurgling stream. Then, it stopped and froze in midair. Yun Zhicheng and the others flew over and looked around carefully. With a point of his hand, the brilliance of the spirit-seeking talisman converged and turned back into a spinning top in Yun Zhicheng's hand. "Big brother." Seeing this, Yun Lan said in a low voice, "The spirit-seeking talisman is the most magical. It doesn't move forward when it's within 100 feet of the spiritual beast for fear of disturbing it. I'm afraid that the robin is within 100 feet. Exactly. But this robin is too small. It's only the size of a thumb. We have to be careful when looking for it." Yun Zhicheng said with a smile. But just as he finished speaking, his expression changed again. He reminded them in a low voice, "Be careful. There seems to be other cultivators in front." Sure enough, on the other side of the stream in front of Yun Zhicheng, 2 male cultivators were floating in mid-air and flying forward very slowly. In their hands, they were holding a rare bamboo green-yellow talisman. Because Yun Zhicheng and the others were very careful to avoid disturbing the robin, and the 2 cultivators were also focused in front of them, they did not realize that there were people behind them. "Big brother." Seeing this, Yun Lan panicked. He tugged at Yun Zhicheng's sleeve and whispered. "Shoo!" Yun Guicheng gestured for Yun Lan to be quiet. He pointed at the 2 cultivators in front of him and took out 2 supreme-grade freezing talismans from his robes and handed them over. Then, he took out a yellow talisman that was shaped like a palm and pointed in another direction. Then, he left on his own. Yun Lan and Yun Feng understood that Yun Zhicheng wanted them to attack the 2 cultivators in front of them from behind. He would go ahead to catch the robin. Thus, Yun Lan and Yun Feng also slowly flew up. With the help of the splashing sound of the stream, they slowly flew towards the other side. However, just as they reached the middle of the stream, 2 figures, still shining with an earthy yellow light, suddenly flew out from the stream. The moment these 2 figures appeared, their hands trembled continuously. Fireball talismans and other offensive yellow talismans were thrown out one after another. Oh no! Yun Lan was greatly alarmed and did not dare to move forward. His entire body abruptly retreated as well. The yellow talisman in his hand was activated by his magic power and turned into a ball of faint mist. Then, it shot towards the cultivator below him, clang, clang, clang. The 2 yellow talismans of ice and fire collided with each other, producing a very unpleasant sound. This sound was admittedly not very loud, but once the surrounding spiritual energy was disturbed, the robin kingfisher was the most sensitive to turbulent spiritual energy. Sure enough, the two cultivators in front could no longer hide their figures and quickly flew forward. One of them even shouted, "Don't run." As the cultivators shouted, the bamboo green-yellow talismans in their hands were thrown out at the same time. The yellow talismans were not thrown towards the robin that was flying between the flowers in front of them. Instead, they were thrown about 3 feet to the left and right of the robin. Once the bamboo green-yellow talismans left their hands, they immediately turned into a ball of flickering light. When they flew to the side of the robin, they turned into 2 net-like balls of light. These 2 balls of light rotated slightly, as if there was a suction force between them. Right on the left and right of the robin, the 2 balls of light suddenly elongated and extended towards each other. In the blink of an eye, the robin was shrouded in the threads of light. The robin was already on guard. When the light threads extended, it had already begun to fly away. However, the light threads seemed to be extremely sticky. As the robin flew, the light threads were also elongated. As more and more light threads were formed, the robin flapped its wings. No matter how hard it tried, it could not fly anymore. It was about to be shrouded in the threads of light, just when the two cultivators were ecstatic and wanted to put the robin in the threads of light into their bags. Several dazzling lights shot from the air not far away. It was a few sword talismans. Under the stimulation of spiritual power, the sword talismans had already flashed with sword light and looked extremely sharp. Seeing this, the two cultivators had no time to control the threads of light. They quickly patted their storage bags and took out a few yellow talismans. They activated their spiritual power and turned into a round and square light curtain, blocking the sword talismans. With a clang, the sword talismans pierced the light curtain, making an ear-piercing sound. Then, with a "kacha" sound, the light curtain shattered and the sharp swords turned into specks of light and disappeared. But when the sword talismans disappeared, a speck of light suddenly expanded and a flying sword smaller than the previous sword talismans suddenly appeared. However, the flying sword's flying speed was much faster than the previous few flying swords. This flying sword was formed in front of the two cultivators, so in the blink of an eye, it flew in front of one of the cultivators and directly pierced the cultivator's Taoist robe. Then, the cultivator's body shone brightly. The golden bell talisman's defense was effective. Unfortunately, the brilliance was annihilated in a flash, followed by the cultivator's miserable scream. When one of the cultivators died under the mother-child flying sword talisman, half of the light curtain immediately dimmed. The robin sensed the change in the spirit chi first and immediately flew towards the dimmed half of the light curtain. With a swoosh, the robin rushed out of the light curtain and saw a streak of emerald green following the slight splashes of the water. After a few flashes, it disappeared. When he looked around, he saw a large green hand. It had just flown out of the forest and it immediately fell. Under the large hand, Yun Guicheng's face was ashen. He looked at the people flying towards him from afar and spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm. Without even looking at his face, he quickly flew towards the two cultivators who were blocking Yun Lan and Yun Feng above the stream. Yun Jicheng had long been annoyed. He slapped his hand and took out a square, flat yellow talisman from his storage bag. He exerted a little force with his left hand and dripped a drop of blood on it. The yellow talisman became even redder after receiving the drop of blood. Chapter 14:19. As for the square yellow talisman in Yun Guicheng's hand, it immediately glowed with an enchanting color after receiving fresh blood. With the activation of Yun Guicheng's magic power, the yellow talisman transformed into the shape of a square flat box. Yun Guicheng had already flown close to Li Yun Peak. He bent his middle finger and flicked the square box twice. 2 tiny red light spots flew out from the box. Yun Guicheng pinched the red light spots between his fingers and flicked them as well. The 2 light spots were like 2 shooting stars, shooting towards Yun Lan and Yun Feng's opponents at lightning speed. The light spots were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they shot into the bodies of the two people. The two people were fighting with the two disciples of the Yun family and did not notice it at all. What was even stranger was that after the two light spots entered their bodies, their movements were not affected at all. It was exactly the same as before. At this moment, seeing the light spots enter the bodies of the two cultivators, Yun Guicheng's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. He turned around and chased in the direction where the robin kingfisher disappeared. At the same time, he formed a strange incantation gesture in his hand and attacked in the direction of the two cultivators. Something strange happened. As Yun Guicheng released the incantation gesture, the two cultivators suddenly showed an extremely painful expression on their faces. Then, fear appeared in their eyes. They immediately wanted to fly up. At the same time, they slapped their storage bags, wanting to take out the yellow talisman given by the Huanhua sect to escape. Unfortunately, just as the two cultivators slapped their storage bags, their arms stiffened and they could not move at all. Yun Feng and Yun Lan, who were opposite them, were overjoyed. They threw out the yellow talismans in their hands. In the blink of an eye, several icicle talismans pierced the bodies of the two cultivators. A few rays of light were annihilated, and the icicles pierced their bodies into pieces. Humph! Yun Lan and Yun Feng snorted coldly. They flew forward and took their storage bags. Then, they followed Yun Guicheng's back and chased after him. At the same time, the four cultivators who had just sent out the mother-child sword talismans arrived. The one in the lead was a bearded man of about the 8th level of Qi refining. He wore an earthen yellow Taoist robe and held a round, glittering sphere in his hand. The three cultivators behind him were also about the 7th level, each holding a yellow talisman. The four of them looked at Yun Guicheng's flying figure and turned to the cultivator who almost caught the robin just now. At this moment, the cultivator had already retrieved the yellow talisman that could emit golden threads. He even held the storage pouch of the cultivator who was killed just now in his hand. His eyes looked at the four people who were already close by and he sneered, Howling Cloud Mahist Clan's Mo Yang, I know. This cultivator had already lost 3 of his companions. Knowing that he no longer had the strength to seize the kingfisher, he unconsciously began to think of retreating. So what if you know that I am from the Mahist clan? The bearded cultivator in the lead, Mo Yang, sneered, I will kill all of you. Do you think that the He clan can still find trouble with the Mahist clan? As he spoke, he waved his hand. The 3 disciples behind him all channeled their magic power. Their hands glowed faintly as they struck towards the remaining He clan disciple. Forget it. The He clan disciple sighed. He knew that since the rules were set by the Rinsing Flower sect and that they did not care about life and death, if the He clan were to find trouble with the Mahist clan, it would naturally be a humiliation to the Rinsing Flower sect. How could the Rinsing Flower sect let this matter rest? The 3 dead He clan disciples had died in vain. As he sighed, the He clan disciple channeled his magic power into the yellow talisman in his hand. The yellow talisman immediately transformed into a blue light shield that enveloped the He clan disciple. Then, a sky-blue brilliance overflowed and spun rapidly. Immediately, all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings was sucked in by this rotation, forming a gust of wind. When the gust of wind passed, the He clan disciple's body had already disappeared from the spot. Humph, this bastard got away with it. Mo Yang said hatefully. It's a pity that I do not have the puppet talisman of the Yun clan. Otherwise, how could I have let you escape with your life? Second brother, what should we do? Should we chase after the Yun clan? Or should we look for other robin birds? Mo Yang thought for a moment and shook his head. Yun Guiyao's cultivation level is very high. Furthermore, he is at the 9th level of Qi refining. With the help of the yellow talisman and blood essence, he can already control low-level magic weapons. We are still inferior to him. Let's look for other robin birds first. As he spoke, he held the shiny ball in his hand in front of his chest. When he spat a mouthful of blood essence onto the ball immediately shone brightly. After a moment, a tranquil scene appeared in the ball. A robin bird was actually flying freely among a large number of strange flowers. Where is this? Mo Yang saw this and his face lit up with joy. He cast a spell on the ball and the image of the robin bird rapidly shrank, revealing the surrounding terrain. It's at the back of the mountain. A Mahist disciple beside him shouted anxiously. Quick, second brother, there are a few groups of cultivators rushing over there. Another disciple pointed with his finger. Indeed, there were 4 groups of cultivators flying in the air around the robin bird. They were all flying towards the flowers. Mo Yang snorted coldly. He cast a spell and the light of the ball was extinguished, returning it to an ordinary-looking ball. Let's go, they are only at the 7th level of Qi refining. How dare they fight with the Mahist clan? Mo Yang waved his hand and the 4 of them immediately flew towards the flowers at the back of the mountain. Xiao Hua was lying on the grass with a grass root in his mouth. He crossed one leg over the other and slowly swayed. His eyes were looking at the slowly drifting clouds in the sky. He seemed to be very satisfied. A scream came from far to his left. It sounded very mournful. 22. Xiao Hua's expression did not change. He counted in his heart. It's only been 4 hours and 22 people have already died. Don't they know? Right now, the robin bird is like a hot chestnut that can't be touched at all. Unless you have a spirit storage pouch and can hide the robin bird inside without others noticing, you will only be attacked by a group of people. Even if you have a spirit storage pouch, it still won't work. When you catch it, it's impossible for no one to see it, unless you secretly put it into a spirit storage pouch. However, immediately after, Xiao Hua bitterly smiled. Since he knew about this principle, the others naturally also knew about it. For someone as smart as Kaizhuxia, she naturally knew about this principle. However, how could she look on helplessly as someone else captured the robin? Perhaps no matter how profound their cultivation was, they would still have to do something. Alright, they. I'll hide first and cultivate for a night. I'll wait for them to kill each other during the night. I'll think about it again tomorrow at noon. Xiao Hua thought. He got up from the ground and looked left and right. He found a hidden place, sat down cross-legged, and began to cultivate. Of course, Xiao Hua was not the only smart and patient person. On the mountain behind the Huanhua sect, there were nearly 20 people scattered everywhere. They coldly watched and quietly waited for the right time. Dusk gradually enveloped the entire mountain peak and the stars in the night sky gradually revealed themselves. Xiao Hua looked around and saw that there was no one nearby. He took out the demonic spear and displayed the 360 moves of the Tong Tian staff technique from beginning to end. He stretched his muscles and bones and secretly laughed. The weight of this spear seems to be a bit lighter and the length is also not suitable. If it was twice as long, it would be about right. This staff technique of mine. I don't know where I learned it from. It seems that I have never seen it in the cultivation world of the country of Shi. If I didn't remember this staff technique and occasionally use it, I'm afraid it wouldn't be easy for me to think of it. That's not right. I remember in Jingbo City, when I went to the west of the city, I also displayed some movement techniques. Those moves don't seem to be within this staff technique. Could it be that I still know some other moves? Xiao Hua suddenly realized, but what kind of moves are they? After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua used his hands and feet to gesture for a while, but he still couldn't remember. Xiao Hua unconsciously smiled bitterly. He looked at the bright stars in the sky and sighed. He sat cross-legged again and began to cultivate. The spiritual energy of the Huanhua sect's back mountain was abundant. It far surpassed all the places Xiao Hua had cultivated in before. Therefore, Xiao Hua's cultivation progress in one night was also considerable. The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone on Xiaohua's body, the reverse light in Xiaohua's space quietly rotated. Xiaohua also opened his eyes. Mother! Mother! Faintly, there seemed to be a voice in Xiaohua's heart, who? The two flames in Xiaohua's eyes flashed and disappeared. His face revealed an extremely shocked expression. However, when he frowned and carefully listened, his ears only heard the mountain wind and the trembling of the flowers. Where was there any other movement? Did I mishear? Xiaohua's brows slightly relaxed. Presumably, it has nothing to do with me. After all, no one would ask me what mother I called. Just as he was thinking, another scream rang out. This time, it wasn't too far from Xiaohua's location. How many is this? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the scream. He thought to himself, last night, the screams didn't stop. I'm afraid a lot of aristocratic children died. Where's Kaizhuxia? Is she still alive? However, it seems that it's still early. I'm not in a hurry. Let's go take a look first. If there's really a chance, it won't be too late to talk about it. Xiaohua made up his mind. He carefully concealed his figure and flew towards the location of the scream. However, Xiaohua was admittedly careful. But just as he approached the location of the scream, a voice came from behind him. It's this guy. I just saw that the robin was caught by this guy. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He turned his head and saw a graceful female cultivator gradually appear in the air. Kaixia. Invisibility talisman. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He had only faintly heard of such a high-level yellow talisman. You brat, hurry up and hand over the robin. At the same time, two silhouettes appeared above Xiaohua's head like Kaixia. One was Kaixia, and the other was a tall and fat cultivator roughly around the 6th level of qi condensation. Chapter 14:20. Hiss, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air, and he secretly cursed in his heart. As soon as they met, Kaixia threw the whereabouts of the kingfisher to him, and these three people surrounded him in a triangular formation. Was there even a need to say their intentions? Thus, Xiaohua didn't answer. He waved his hand, and a large stack of fireball talismans flew towards Kaixia and that fat cultivator. His figure turned around, and he quickly flew towards Kaixia. Courting death. Kaixia and the fat cultivator both sneered. They clapped their hands, and their respective freezing talismans, icicle talismans, and defensive yellow talismans all flew forward. Rumble, a burst of noise sounded. The two people who were caught off guard were hit by the top-grade fireball talismans refined by Xiaohua, and they were practically unable to stand steadily in midair. Taking advantage of the fireball talismans exploding behind him, Xiaohua also raised his hand, and a few fireball talismans smashed towards Kaixia. Kaixia moved earlier than Xiaohua. Just as Xiaohua attacked Kaixia, Kaixia's yellow talismans were also shot out. However, what surprised Kaixia was that although her yellow talismans were fast, they were actually not as fast as Xiaohua's flying speed. Xiaohua actually used a figure she had never seen before to miraculously dodge the yellow talismans in midair, and instead used a pile of fireball talismans to smash towards her. Just as Kaixia was stunned, Xiaohua's fireball talismans had already followed and exploded around Kaixia. A wave of heat attacked, and several huge forces attacked from all directions, blowing away the defensive yellow talismans around Kaixia's body, causing them to brighten and darken, as if they were about to collapse. Strange. This guy's fireball talismans are actually this powerful? Kaixia said in shock. And his flying speed. Flying speed. Just as Kaixia thought of Xiaohua's flying speed, an ominous premonition suddenly appeared in her heart. This feeling would last forever. Kaixia didn't hesitate to slap her storage pouch, wanting to take out the teleportation yellow talisman. However, just as her hand was about to touch the storage pouch, a burst of sharp pain actually came from her back. She didn't dare to believe it, and saw that Xiaohua had already approached her from behind, and unknowingly pierced through her defensive yellow talisman. You. Kai Yingxia only said one word, and then her vision turned black, and her figure fell from midair. Yingxia. Not far away, Kai Yuxia had just stabilized her body when she saw Kai Yingxia fall from the sky. Xiaohua was standing steadily where Kai Yingxia was standing just now, holding Kai Yingxia's storage pouch in his hand. Little thief, hand over your life. Kai Yuxia shouted. Ignoring the reaction of the fat cultivator beside her, she urged her magic power and flew towards Xiaohua. When the fat cultivator saw this, a ruthless look appeared on his face. He took out a jade-like Dharma artifact from his storage bag and chased after them. Xiaohua looked on coldly. Ignoring him, he turned and flew away. Although his speed wasn't fast, it was still comparable to the 8th level of qi refining. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Kai Yuxia and the fat cultivator's sight. Xiaohua, Kai Yuxia shouted, I swear that I won't let you go. I swear that I won't let the Kai family of Liang go. Kai Yuxia saw that she couldn't catch up with them, so she could only threaten them and fly to the place where Kai Yingxia's body fell. Fellow Taoist Kai, don't be impatient. Let's first see how fellow Taoist Kai died. The fat cultivator said in a low voice, this Xiaohua's cultivation was only at the 4th level of qi refining, how could he kill fellow Taoist Kai who was at the 7th level of qi refining? Kai Yuxia's face revealed a sad expression. She picked up Kai Yingxia's smashed body and examined it from top to bottom. She said in a low voice, fellow Taoist Gao, my sister, didn't seem to be killed by Xiaohua using magic power. There are no traces of yellow talismans on her body. Huh. That's strange. The cultivator surnamed Gao was even more puzzled. He thought for a moment and said, then I'll have to ask fellow Taoist Kai to take a closer look. Are there any fatal injuries? Kai Yuxia listened and carefully examined the body again. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Kai Yuxia cried out in alarm, here. Following Kai Yuxia's cry, the cultivator surnamed Gao, whose back was facing her, turned his head. His gaze fell on Kai Yingxia's exposed back. There was a jet-black wound. It looked very small, much smaller than a baby's little mouth. Stab wound. Devil tool. How is this possible? The cultivator surnamed Gao was shocked and said in disbelief. But at the same time, he suddenly felt something was wrong. He quickly turned his head and shouted, Who? Who? Kai Yuxia was also shocked. She followed the cultivator surnamed Gao's gaze, but there was nothing behind him. There was only the mountain breeze and the fragrance of flowers. There's no one. Kai Yuxia looked at the cultivator surnamed Gao with some inquiry. Cough cough. The cultivator surnamed Gao awkwardly said, I was a bit suspicious. While the cultivator surnamed Gao was coughing, Kai Yuxia's eyes revealed a kind of horror. She stared straight behind the cultivator surnamed Gao, as if she was looking at a malicious spirit. A pitch-black spear tip slowly appeared behind the cultivator surnamed Gao's back, slowly stabbing towards his back. That cultivator surnamed Gao also seemed to have realized something. Just as he was about to turn around again, Xiaohua's tall and thin figure appeared behind him. The tip of the demonic spear in his hand also fiercely pierced the cultivator surnamed Gao's back. Ah! The cultivator surnamed Gao was worthy of being a 7th-layer qi refining cultivator from a cultivation family. At the same time the devil's spear tip was curled up with black light, he actually waved his hand and threw the yellow talismans he had just been on guard at Xiaohua. However, Xiaohua didn't panic in the slightest. He urged his magic power, and his figure disappeared again. At the same time, he used his movement technique to dodge the yellow talismans without using any magic power. Invisibility. Body. Talisman. Kai Yuxia said word by word from her mouth, "You're a 4th layer qi refining cultivator. How can you use an invisibility talisman that only 6th layer qi refining cultivators can use?" When she saw that Xiaohua had actually hidden himself and dodged the yellow talismans, she became even more nervous. She was very puzzled in her heart. This invisibility talisman can't use magic power when it's invisibility. Once magic power is used, the invisibility effect will disappear. This guy, how can he still dodge the yellow talismans when he's invisible? With a plop, the fat cultivator surnamed Gao's corpse also fell next to Kai Yuxia. Kai Yuxia's mind raced. She reached out and tore off the corpse's storage pouch. At the same time, she took out her own yellow teleportation talisman and sent out her magic power without any hesitation. It was only after Kai Yuxia and Kai Yingxia's figures disappeared that Xiaohua's figure gradually revealed himself. This is bad. I'm still inexperienced. That cultivator surnamed Gao was clearly bluffing. Why couldn't I hold myself back? If I had taken a few more steps, wouldn't I have gotten rid of him and Kai Yuxia together? Now that I've missed Kai Yuxia, it'll be troublesome. Soon after, Xiaohua frowned and patted his forehead. A dim yellow talisman appeared in his hand. Looking at the yellow talisman that was almost devoid of heaven and earth's spiritual energy, Xiaohua was somewhat regretful. Alas, this invisibility talisman is really good. It's a pity that I can't exchange it in EG. As for this, it seems like I can only use it once or twice. At the same time, on the north side of the foothills, in a place where the sun was shining brightly, a robin was struggling in midair. Near it, a 3-foot square cage was faintly discernible. Below the cage, a middle-aged cultivator with a white face and no beard was forming hand seals and doing his best to send magic power into the cage. Around the middle-aged cultivator, there were already several corpses lying in disarray. Wang! Pa! A large green hand first flew out from a nearby cave and then patted the cage in midair. Under the enormous force of the large green hand, the cage immediately turned into specks of fluorescence and disappeared. The middle-aged cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the ground. Soon after, the robin regained its freedom and flew up like a green ray of light, preparing to escape. But at this moment, the big green hand suddenly spread open and its 5 fingers separated. A rotating mass of air was released from the big hand and instantly enveloped an area of about 10 feet around it. Although the robin was fast, it only flew to the edge of the 10 feet radius before the large hand's rotating mass of qi enveloped the robin. Boom! The large green hand slowly patted down. When it got close to the robin, it suddenly clenched like a clenched fist. Okay. A clear voice came from within the cave. Then, the figures of Yun Guicheng, Yun Lan and Yun Feng flew out of the cave. As soon as Yun Guicheng came out of the cave, he immediately patted his storage bag. Several sword talismans flew into the air and headed in 5 different directions. The sword talismans faintly shone with a cold light, and the sword light was fluctuating. Fellow cultivators. The robin has been taken by the Yun family. I hope that you won't fall out with I. Yun Guicheng formed a seal in his hand and said coldly, there are still 2 more robin birds in this mountain that have not been caught. You'd better focus on them. After a long while, several figures quickly flew out from the directions pointed by the sword talismans and flew in 2 different directions. Looking at the cultivation of these people, they were all around the 8th or 9th level. When the figures disappeared, Yun Guicheng's face showed joy. He formed a seal in his hand and the large green hand flew back. When the large hand opened, it was the unconscious robin. Yun Guicheng pasted a yellow talisman on the robin's body. Only then did he fall and stumble. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face instantly turned pale. As Yun Guicheng suffered from the backlash of his magic power, the large green hand quickly shrank and turned into a green-yellow talisman that fell into Yun Guicheng's hand. Congratulations, big brother. Yun Lan and Yun Feng smiled and cupped their hands. Don't be careless. As long as the disciples of the Huanhua sect don't appear, everything will change. Yun Guicheng placed the robin in his arms and took out an elixir to consume. Only then did his face slowly relax. How do we deal with this person? Yun Lan looked at the cultivator who had just fainted and asked softly. Let him wake up slowly. Yun Feng smiled and said, I'm afraid this guy has no chance. Wake up slowly. Yun Guicheng glanced at Yun Feng and then at the cultivator who had fallen on the ground. He said coldly, since we have a grudge, when will we kill him? Yun Feng, you're too childish. Yes, I understand. Yun Feng said in panic. Chapter 1421. Beside a small waterfall formed by a stream, an emerald green spirit fruit was growing among the vines on the mountain wall. Suddenly, an emerald green shadow flew out of the forest and approached the spirit fruit in the blink of an eye. When the shadow stopped, it turned out to be a thumb-sized robin. The robin seemed to have been disturbed a lot this day and night. It no longer dared to go forward and suck the juice of the spirit fruit as if it was familiar with the way it used to. Instead, it stopped about a foot away from the spirit fruit and stayed still. After a moment, seeing that there was no movement in the surroundings, the robin was relieved. It flapped its wings and was about to pierce its beak into the emerald fruit when a 10 feet wide net suddenly shot out from the stone wall between the vines beside the emerald fruit, trapping both the emerald fruit and the robin within. Ha ha ha! A wild laugh came from above the stone wall where the waterfall was. It was Qing Ming who had set up the ambush. Behind him, Lu Chongqi also revealed his figure with a smile. However, the Qin clan disciples who had been following behind them were nowhere to be seen. They must have lost their lives in the hunt last night. Qing Ming's face was full of wild laughter. He gave a thumbs up and praised, fellow Taoist Lu is wise. Instead of looking for the robin, you only looked for the rare emerald juice fruit and set up an ambush next to the fruit to lure the robin into the trap. Fellow Taoist Lu is really smart. Fellow Taoist Cheng is too kind. It was only when I saw fellow Taoist Cheng's death last night that I had the idea. This is also fellow Taoist Cheng's blessing. Lu Chongqi cupped his hands and smiled. Fellow Taoist Lu, please put away this net spirit talisman. If you didn't have this spirit talisman, I'm afraid even if the robin fell into the trap, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. Qing Ming laughed. Yes, I will put it away right away. As Lu Chongqi spoke, he had already flown into the air. He slapped a yellow talisman on his forehead. Then, he made a gesture. The net covering the robin flashed with a red brilliance and gradually shrank. It slowly turned into a net of 1 foot in size and flew into Lu Chongqi's hand. At this moment, a figure like a flying sword rushed out of the waterfall, splashing water everywhere. Looking at the fluttering Taoist robe and black hair like clouds, it was Kaizhuxia who had been lying in ambush for a long time. Kaizhuxia had used the spirit-seeking talisman 3 times yesterday, but all of them had failed. She had been snatched away by others, so like Lu Chongqi, she thought of other ways to find the emerald juice fruit beside the waterfall. Unfortunately, she did not have a net spirit talisman, so she could only lie in ambush and wait for the emerald juice fruit to come to her. She was aware of Qing Ming and Lu Chongqi's arrangements, but her cultivation was far inferior to theirs, so she didn't dare to make a move. She waited for them to succeed before she dared to take the risk and charge out. Who is it? Upon seeing Kaizhuxia's figure fly out, Qing Ming, who had long been prepared, sneered. He held a large number of yellow talismans in his hand and smashed them down like hailstones. Of course, Kaizhuxia was well prepared to take advantage of the situation. She also threw out several yellow talismans to block Qing Ming's attack. Her other hand reached out to grab the net that was close at hand, hee. There was another sneer. A sword light flew out from under Kaizhuxia's body. At the same time, a cultivator covered in earthy yellow brilliance emerged from the ground. Ah, Kaizhuxia was shocked. She thought she was the first to arrive. She didn't see anyone here except for Qingming and Luchengqi, so she didn't have any defense against the ground. The flying sword talisman was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it pierced Kai Zhuoxia's abdomen, forcing her to stop reaching out to grab the net. She could only roll herself up and fly to the side. The flying sword talisman brushed past Kai Zhuoxia's Daoist robe, shattering the iron cloak talisman and flying straight into the air. That was close. Kai Zhuoxia's back was covered in cold sweat. She was just about to stabilize her unbalanced body when Luchengqi, who was in midair, revealed a sinister smile. With a wave of his hand, an extremely fine brilliance quietly flew toward Kai Zhuoxia's glabella. Black iron needle. Kai Zhuoxia's heart sank. This black iron needle was a low-level magic tool driven by Foundation establishment cultivators using their divine thoughts. It was extremely sharp and could break through defenses. With Kai Zhuoxia's cultivation, not to mention that the iron cloak talisman was broken, even if her defenses were intact, it wouldn't be easy for her to dodge it. And, not to mention that she was now leaning in midair. Sigh, Kai Zhuoxia let out a sigh from the bottom of her heart. She slightly urged her transcendence energy and activated the transmission yellow talisman in her hand. A ray of light emitted from her hand, and Kai Zhuoxia's figure disappeared in midair. However, what happened next was completely out of Kai Zhuoxia's expectations. Just as Kai Zhuoxia's figure disappeared, the black iron needle that was flying towards Kai Zhuoxia suddenly changed its direction. With a sharp turn, it rapidly pierced towards the cultivator who used the Earth Escape talisman. Luchengqi's black iron needle was actually attacking this cultivator, and not Kai Zhuoxia. Not only was Kai Zhuoxia fooled, that cultivator was also fooled. He was prepared to use one hand to grab the net and the other to attack Luchengqi. Unfortunately, that black iron needle suddenly changed its direction and he had no time to dodge. With a "chi" sound, the black iron needle pierced through his defensive yellow talisman and directly pierced through his Daoist robe, piercing right into his heart. Ah! A wave of unbearable pain came from this cultivator's body. The cultivator cried out in grief and his entire body went limp. He fell from midair and couldn't be more dead. Humph! Luchengqi let out a cold snort. With a wave of his hand, the black iron needle flew out of the cultivator's corpse, flashed through the air, and landed in his hand. Great magical power! Qingming also flew over at this time with a look of horror on his face and praised again. I wouldn't dare. Luchengqi's face regained its smile. He made a hand seal with his other hand and the net floating in midair flew into his hand. Luchengqi didn't even look at it. He only looked around as if he was guarding against other people's sneak attacks. Ha ha ha, fellow Daoist Lu, don't look. Just based on the black iron needle that fellow Daoist can control as a Foundation establishment cultivator, who would dare to come forward? Qingming laughed and said, quickly take out the robin. I will stick a spirit suppression talisman on it. Yes, that's exactly what I should do. Luchengqi said and put away the net, revealing the motionless robin inside. However, he didn't directly hand the robin to Qingming. Instead, he took out a yellow talisman from his storage bag and stuck it on the robin. Qingming saw this and said, fellow Daoist Lu is really meticulous. Thank you very much. Quickly give the robin to I. Unexpectedly, Luchengqi bared his teeth and laughed. He put the robin into his arms and said with a smile, fellow Daoist Cheng, you're wrong. This robin was captured by I. Why should I give it to fellow Daoist? You? Qingming flew into a rage and jumped up. You're going back on your word. Didn't we already make an oath? The first robin is I's and the second is fellow Daoist's. Luchengqi wasn't nervous at all and said with a smile, fellow Daoist Cheng, you're wrong. Fellow Daoist, please take a look. It was I who came up with the idea to search for the jade fruit, right? This net spirit talisman is I's, right? It was also I who killed one of the two cultivators who coveted the robin and repelled the other, right? Tell me, what right do you have to want this robin? But the spirit used to find this jade fruit is my Qing clan's, right? Qing Ming's face turned red and he said anxiously, besides, you also made an oath with I. My Qing clan's disciple protected you last night and even lost his life. He, fellow Taoist Cheng, do you believe such a childish trick like making an oath? Lu Chongqi sneered and pointed his finger. The black iron needle spun in the air and stopped in front of Qing Ming's forehead. He said, fellow Taoist Cheng, although your cultivation is at the 7th level of qi refinement, I'm afraid you don't have any power to resist this black iron needle. I won't take your life for the sake of your Qing clan's disciple's life last night. Consider yesterday's oath worthy. Qing Ming was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at the black iron needle and said, you're only a 5th level qi refinement itinerant cultivator. Even if you have some secret skill to control the black iron needle, can you sneak attack a 7th level qi refinement cultivator? Can you kill a 7th level cultivator who's already prepared? If fellow Taoist Cheng doesn't believe me, you can try. Lu Chongqi sneered. Ha. At this time, Qing Ming actually raised his head and laughed. He shook his head slightly and said, itinerant cultivators, oh itinerant cultivators. As expected, they're all foolishly arrogant itinerant cultivators. Don't think you're invincible just because you can use the black iron needle. Right, fellow Taoist Lu, do you still remember the oath you made yesterday? Seeing Qing Ming's abnormal behavior, Lu Chongqi was stunned and his heart trembled. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, I've long forgotten. If fellow Taoist wants to know, think about it yourself. Then, he looked at the sky and said, it's getting late. I have to stay away for a while and wait for the Huanhua sect disciples. Fellow Taoist Cheng, farewell. If you violate this oath, your spirit will no longer be at the mercy of others. You'll have to work like an ox or a horse for 100 years. Fellow Taoist Lu, do you still remember? Qing Ming sneered and slapped his hand. He took out a fist-sized, strange-looking bell from his storage bag. You. Qing Ming was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Qing Ming activate his magic power and shake the bell slightly. Ding, ding, ding. There was a soft sound. It was very ordinary, but the sound of the bell was like a bolt from the blue in Lu Chongqi's ears. His heart was about to swell. What made Lu Chongqi the most nervous was that with the sound of the bell, he felt like his body was about to float. Lu Chongqi knew that this was definitely not his body floating. When he thought of Qing Ming's oath, he suddenly realized that this feeling of floating was probably the precursor to his soul leaving his body. When did you do this? Lu Chongqi calmed down in horror and asked in a low voice. There's no time at all. I'll just strike fellow Taoist Li's palm when I'm making the vow. Qing Ming was obviously confident and said with a smile, of course, if fellow Taoist Lu keeps your oath, this puppet talisman will lose its effect after noon and won't affect you in the slightest. Chapter 1422. How could Lu Chongqi believe that? He shook his head with a wry smile. I have been scheming for a long time, but it's all for someone else. Fellow Taoist Lu, you're wrong. You're acting according to our plan yesterday. Qing Ming corrected him. Forget it, I'll return the robin to you now. Please let I go. Lu Chongqi lowered his head and pleaded. No need, fellow Taoist Lu. Since fellow Taoist likes to hold the robin bird, you can always hold it for this poor Taoist. Qing Ming sneered. This poor Taoist is very relieved to leave the robin bird with you. Who is it? Lu Chongqi felt a chill in his heart. He pointed his finger, and the black iron needle flew toward the air to Qing Ming's left. Qing Ming was startled when he saw Lu Chongqi move. He was about to ring the spirit's summoning bell when he saw the black iron needle flying to the side instead of between his eyebrows. He was slightly stunned and his head involuntarily tilted slightly, However, when Qingming saw that there was nothing in the air to his left, he cursed in his heart. However, when he turned to look at Lu Chongqi was still standing there and didn't seem to have moved at all. However, when Qingming saw Lu Chongqi's appearance clearly, the expression on his face changed drastically. Lu Chongqi was already holding the robin in his hand, and his thumb was the yellow talisman on the robin. "Fellow Taoist Lu, why are you doing this?" Qingming steadied his mind and smiled. "Since fellow Taoist Lu wants to abide by yesterday's oath, I will remove the puppet talisman and return fellow Taoist Lu to your freedom. How about that?" Lu Chongqi stared at Qingming for a long while, then sneered, "Fellow Taoist Cheng, you must know that if this humble Taoist removes the yellow talisman on the robin bird, it will immediately escape. Even if this humble Taoist uses a little bit of strength, the robin bird will be crushed to death by this humble Taoist. Can this reckless robin bird let fellow Taoist Cheng join the Huanhua sect? Fellow Taoist Lu wants to test I's family's puppet technique?" Qingming laughed. "No, I want to see if fellow Taoist or I is faster." "Fellow Taoist Lu, didn't I just say? As long as you return the robin to I will remove the puppet talisman," Qingming said in a low voice. "Yes, I do not dare to be careless when facing fellow Taoist Cheng's Haiqing prefecture." Lu Chongqi nodded and said, "However, I hope that fellow Taoist Cheng will do as I say. Isn't it just removing your puppet talisman? What do you want I to do?" Qingming was puzzled. "Don't play dumb." Lu Chongqi sneered and pointed at the soul-absorbing bell in Qingming's hand. "If I don't have this bell in my hand, I'm afraid I won't be able to escape from your control for the rest of my life, right?" "This." Qingming's expression changed drastically and he said anxiously, "This soul-absorbing bell is an heirloom of the Qing clan. How can I give it to you? I don't care if it's an heirloom or not. If you don't let I feel at ease, I won't return the robin to you. Hee, if you want to delay, I'm not afraid. When the time comes, I'll hold the robin in my hand and be a disciple of the Huanhua sect. I don't believe that the Huanhua sect can't break your Qing clan's puppet technique," Lu Chongqi said confidently. "Oh. Okay." Qingming lowered his head and thought for a moment before agreeing. "How do you want to get the soul-absorbing bell?" "Fellow Taoist Cheng and I will each put our things on the ground. We'll each go around and pick up the things on the ground at the same time. What do you think, fellow Taoist Cheng?" Lu Chongqi must have thought it through and said immediately, "Okay, we'll do as fellow Taoist Lu says." Qingming's face was distorted, but he could only grit his teeth and agree firmly. Qingming put the soul-absorbing bell at his feet and Lu Chongqi also put the robin with the yellow talisman at his feet. "Okay, fellow Taoist Cheng, I'll start counting. After each count, we'll each take a step around the circle," Lu Chongqi said. "Please." 1. Lu Chongqi shouted, and the two of them each took a step away from their original positions. 2. 3. 4. After Lu Chongqi counted 10 times, the two of them were already far away from the soul-absorbing bell and the robin. Seeing that they were about the same distance from the soul-absorbing bell and the robin, Lu Chongqi couldn't hold back anymore. When he shouted, 11, he flew up and pounced on the soul-absorbing bell. Qingming's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery as he watched Lu Chongqi fly up. As he flew towards the robin, he clapped his hand and a bell that looked exactly like the soul-absorbing bell appeared in his hand. Lu Chongqi, who was flying in the air, didn't panic when he saw Qingming. He already had a bad feeling in his heart. When he saw the other soul-absorbing bell, his body shook violently. He stopped in place and said in a trembling voice, You used a fake soul-absorbing bell to trick I? No way." Qingming shook his head and sneered. "There are 2 soul-absorbing bells in the Qing family." As he said that, the soul-absorbing bell in his hand shook without hesitation. The feeling of floating appeared in Lu Chongqi's mind again. Lu Chongqi knew that if he felt that he was flying, his soul would be taken away by the soul-absorbing bell and he would become an unconscious puppet. In an instant, Lu Chongqi made a decision. He spat out a mouthful of essence blood and suddenly cast a spell that he had been holding in his hand for a long time, hitting somewhere far away. Just after he cast the spell, Lu Chongqi's face was as white as a sheet. His other hand backhanded and hit his own forehead. But, the moment Lu Chongqi hit his forehead, a strange splendor suddenly appeared in his dead fish-like eyes. It turned out that Lu Chongqi's gaze was on the robin with the yellow talisman stuck on it beside Qingming. It actually floated in the air, when Lu Chongqi saw it, Qingming naturally noticed it too. He shouted and stabbed an ice thorn talisman at the top of the robin's head. Chi, as if a layer of paper was pierced, a tall and thin figure emerged in the air. It was Xiaohua with the robin in his hand. "How dare you!" Qingming was unable to restrain his anger. He channeled all the transcendence energy in his body and shot out the yellow talisman in his hand. He wanted to kill this little 4th-level Qi refining cultivator who had used the invisibility talisman to sneak up on him while he was fighting with Lu Chongqi. However, Xiaohua's eyes were full of mockery when he saw the yellow talismans flying toward him. He also used his magic power to activate the flight talisman. His whole body flew into the air at a speed that Qingming couldn't even imagine. "You!" Qingming was horrified. Just as he was about to activate the flight talisman, he suddenly felt something strange behind him. Before he could turn his head, he felt a piercing pain in his heart. A slender black iron needle pierced through his chest and chased after Xiaohua from afar. "Ah!" Qingming looked at his chest in disbelief. A drop of blood was oozing out of the wound. As early as when Lu Chongqi cast the spell with all his might before his death, Qingming thought that it might be the black iron needle that flew away just now. However, because of Xiaohua's sudden appearance and taking away the robin, Qingming lost his vigilance. He didn't expect that. Lu Chongqi's all-out attack would be so sharp that he, a cultivator at the 7th level of Qi refinement, didn't have the slightest ability to fight back. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. This was the only sentence Qingming could think of before he died. Xiaohua had become the fisherman. He flew in the air at top speed, always paying attention to the movements behind him. When he saw Qingming stabbed to death by the black iron needle, his figure also stopped. Seeing the black iron needle fly past him, he only grabbed it with his hand and caught it in the hollow of his palm. The black iron needle was heavy in his hand. The entire needle was black, and the tip of the needle flashed with a sharp light. "Good stuff," Xiaohua praised in his heart. He stored it in his space. Immediately, Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something. His figure suddenly flew down and took Lu Chongqi and Qing Kong's storage pouches, as well as the 2 soul-absorbing bells. When he landed on the ground again, he raised his hand and looked at the robin with a yellow talisman stuck on it. He drew back his mouth and laughed out loud. This is what it means to wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort. Xiaohua laughed foolishly. Looking at the robin, it was as if he could see his bright future in the rinsing flower sect. Just as he was about to put the robin into his bosom, at this moment, a voice came from the air. "If it were me, I would obediently put this robin on the ground and quickly flee far away. Only this way can I still preserve my life." Xiaohua found this voice very unfamiliar. He frowned and sneered, "Which fellow Taoist is this? So arrogant?" However, when he saw the cultivator flying in the air, his nose was about to become crooked from anger. He saw a 16-year-old youth in a pure white Taoist robe. His facial features were picturesque. Flying in the air, he looked like the legendary Golden Boy. Unfortunately, this youth was only at the 4th layer of Qi refining. No matter what, it was impossible for Xiaohua to feel threatened. What? Could it be that fellow Taoist has the confidence to kill I before I can crush this robin to death? Xiaohua sneered, seeing that fellow Taoist is also at the fourth layer of qi refining just like I won't care about your rudeness. You'd better get out of here quickly. Pfft. The youth laughed out loud and said, fellow Taoist is indeed a fourth layer cultivator like I. These words are exactly what I wanted to say. I didn't think that fellow Taoist would actually beat me to it. Fellow Taoist must have lost his mind, right? Xiao Hua was too lazy to pay attention to him. He activated his magic power and was about to fly away. Suddenly, a divine sense was released from the youth's back. It swept past Xiao Hua's body with incomparable speed and immediately locked onto Xiao Hua. Foundation Establishment Cultivator. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. His eyes widened as he looked at the youth's back in disbelief. Over there was an old man wearing white clothes. His face was slightly green and he had a brandy nose. He slowly flew out. Ah! Xiao Hua's heart chilled. This Foundation Establishment old man was precisely the one he and Kaizhuxia saw on their way to the Rinsing Flower sect. Greetings, senior. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and promptly bowed in greeting. And I didn't think that the last robin would actually be obtained by you. The old man's tone was indifferent as he said, seeing that you have the same cultivation as Tong, this old man won't take your life. Take the robin and bring it over. Chapter 1423. Senior. Xiao Hua gazed at the Foundation Establishment old man standing not too far away. In his heart, he was very reluctant to part with the robin in his bosom. He smiled apologetically and said, Senior's words are unreasonable. Since Senior knows that Junior's cultivation is shallow, you should know that Junior obtained this robin with great difficulty. Junior's future cultivation will be entrusted to this robin. Senior, won't you go look at the other two robin birds? You're too long-winded. Since I took a fancy to this robin bird, then I'll take this one. What right do you have to be long-winded? That young cultivator was somewhat impatient. He looked at the sky and said, it's almost noon. Do you think I still have time? The Foundation Establishment old man's face turned cold. In a flash, he released his spiritual pressure, firmly suppressing Xiao Hua. The flow of true qi in his entire body was slightly sluggish, not to mention the circulation of his magic power. Alas, qi refining and Foundation Establishment are really too far apart. This isn't a disparity in magic power, but an essential difference in realms. Previously, Xiao Hua still wanted to rely on his flying speed to waste time with the Foundation Establishment old man and wait for the arrival of the Rinsing Flower sect disciples. However, as soon as the Foundation Establishment old man released his spiritual pressure, Xiao Hua knew that as long as he couldn't compare with the old man in terms of spiritual pressure, he would never be able to escape the old man's pursuit. Cultivation is the eternal theme. Xiao Hua sighed. He took out the robin and sneered, Senior, Junior can't escape. However, Senior's spiritual pressure can't stop Junior's thoughts of fighting to the death. Junior only needs to pinch this robin to death. Presumably, Senior can't stop me, right? Just now, this fellow Taoist also clearly said that Senior already doesn't have time to look for other robin birds. This fellow Taoist's chance to pass the selection. I'm afraid there's no chance, right? Ha ha ha, the Foundation Establishment old man raised his head and laughed heartily. He said, Junior, you actually have some backbone. However, did you forget why the Rinsing Flower sect set the selection criteria at the fourth level of qi refining? Huh? Xiao Hua's heart stirred. In a flash, the bottom of his heart became clear. So it turned out that the Huanhua sect had chosen disciples, for another reason. Just as Xiao Hua was in a daze, the Foundation Establishment old man's figure suddenly moved. Several afterimages flashed by, and he was already in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. He hurriedly urged his transcendence energy to dodge, but under the old man's pressure, the transcendence energy in his body was far from as smooth as before. Xiaohua was helpless. He finally activated the yellow transmission talisman in his left hand when he saw the Foundation establishment old man. At the same time, his right hand exerted strength, wanting to crush the robin to death. However, the situation had long gone beyond Xiaohua's control. Before his right hand could exert strength, he only felt a cool breeze blow past, and his hand was empty. That mockingbird had already been snatched away from Xiaohua's hand by the approaching Foundation establishment old man using magic. Fortunately, just as the old man was making hand seals to attack Xiaohua, the yellow teleportation talisman had already been activated. Xiaohua's figure disappeared on the spot. Humph, a little fourth layer Qi condensation cultivator actually wants to play tricks with this old man. The Foundation establishment old man coldly snorted. He waved his hand, and that mockingbird flew into the young cultivator's hand. At this moment, a thunderclap rang out, and the voice of a Huanhua sect disciple was heard. Noon has arrived. Which fellow Taoist has obtained a mockingbird? Please show yourself. Alright, Tong, Although it's already been arranged, this old man still needs to hide first. You can go. The Foundation establishment old man waved his hand, and his figure sank into the ground and disappeared. Thank you, granduncle. That young cultivator bowed in salute, and immediately flew into the air. As for Xiaohua, there was a slight dizziness in front of his eyes. By the time he looked again, his feet had already landed on the ground. He was inside a rather large palace hall. Oh, fellow Taoist Xiao, you also came back. I thought noon had already arrived, but fellow Taoist Xiao still hadn't returned. Presumably. Kai Zhuoxia's voice rang in Xiaohua's ear with great astonishment. Xiaohua's complexion was ashen. He looked at Kai Zhuoxia, who was walking over from not too far away, and he felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. What's wrong? Fellow Taoist Xiao. Seeing that Xiaohua's expression wasn't right, Kai Zhuoxia comforted him. Victory and defeat are common in war. Besides, fellow Taoist being able to escape with his life is already pretty good. I came early, and I heard from the fellow Taoist who came back earlier that there were a lot of casualties in the back mountain. Xiaohua thought about the danger just now, and he really had a lingering fear. That was a Foundation establishment cultivator, and he actually dared to threaten him. He really had been confused by the Huanhua sect's painting. Soon after, Xiaohua looked all around. This palace hall was extremely large, but there were very few cultivators standing in it. With a rough look, there were only about 20 people. Kai Yuxia wasn't among them. Xiaohua said in a low voice, fellow Taoist Kai, why don't I see the two disciples from Qing Yang's Kai family? They? Kai Zhuoxia's expression was strange, and she said in a low voice, I heard from the fellow Taoist who came out earlier that only Kai Yuxia came out. Moreover, as soon as she came out, she immediately left in a hurry and didn't say anything. Oh, Xiaohua nodded slightly. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Seeing that Xiaohua's expression was strange as soon as he came out and was looking everywhere, Kai Zhuoxia suddenly came to a realization and said in alarm, could it be? Xiaohua knew what Kai Zhuoxia knew, so he nodded and said, Kai Yingxia was indeed killed by I. This. Kai Zhuoxia sucked in a breath of cold air, and a trace of helplessness flashed through her eyes. Fellow Taoist Kai. Xiaohua was just about to explain the course of events to Kai Zhuoxia when he heard a sound coming from the palace hall's entrance in the distance. When he raised his eyes to look, he saw that the Huanhua sect's disciples were leading a group of cultivators to participate in the selection, and they were entering in a line. We'll talk about this later. Xiaohua said in a low voice. I was also forced to take action because I had no other choice. Alas, I believe in fellow Taoist Xiao. Kai Zhuoxia had followed Xiaohua all the way here, and she still believed in Xiaohua's character, but, this time, the target of Xiaohua's attack was unexpectedly Qing Yang's Kai family, which really made things difficult for Kai Zhuoxia. After Xiaohua finished speaking, he raised his eyes and looked over. In the center of the palace hall, the male and female disciples of the Huanhua sect were walking in front, while Yun Jicheng, Mo Yang, and that young cultivator were following behind them. The remaining 40 to 50 cultivators were hanging their heads, dejectedly following behind them. Needless to say, Yun Jicheng, Mo Yang, and that young cultivator should have passed this selection. Sure enough, at the head of the palace hall, on a high platform, a middle-aged late-stage foundation establishment cultivator was already sitting cross-legged at an unknown time. When the Huanhua sect's disciples led the three people to the front of the platform, that foundation establishment cultivator said in a low voice, "Ijia, are these the three disciples who passed this time's selection?" Reporting to Marshal Uncle, Yun Jicheng, Mo Yang, and Yu Tong are the three disciples who passed this time's selection. That male disciple, Ijia, cupped his hands and saluted. Good. Have you verified that there's no mistake? This disciple personally checked the robin birds. They were released by this disciple. Moreover, these three robin birds are also alive. Ijia said with a smile, this disciple has done this countless times, so it shouldn't be wrong. Good, then take these three disciples to the Jade Archive Hall to register. The foundation establishment cultivator waved his hand and said. At this moment, a voice sounded from below the platform, "Senior, this junior doesn't know if it's appropriate to ask. Who's making a ruckus?" Ijie frowned. As he spoke, he turned his head to look, only to see Xiaohua stepping out from the crowd and cupping his hands. That Yu Tong naturally also saw him, but his expression didn't change. He just looked on indifferently. "Who are you? What do you want to ask?" The foundation establishment cultivator's divine sense swept over and asked very indifferently. "This junior is a loose cultivator, Xiaohua. There's something that I don't understand." Xiaohua bowed again and asked, "When this junior was participating in the selection, I met a foundation establishment senior. This senior snatched the robin birds that this junior had already obtained." There was such a thing. That foundation establishment cultivator glanced at Ijia, then turned his head and asked Xiaohua again, "Then what about the foundation establishment cultivator?" This junior doesn't know. I still need to ask fellow Taoist Yu Tong." Xiaohua pointed at Yu Tong and said. Reporting to senior. Yu Tong stepped forward and said with a smile, "This Xiaohua is purely talking nonsense. I snatched the robin birds from his hands. Because I was merciful, I didn't take his life. He came here first and slandered me, wanting to make trouble without reason. Xiaohua, I ask you, how did you catch this robin bird?" The foundation establishment cultivator asked. "This junior snatched it from the hands of Qingming and Lu Chengqi." Xiaohua said truthfully. Apart from you and Yu Tong, the other cultivators are all at the 5th level of qi refining and above. What ability do you have to be able to snatch the robin birds from their hands? I don't believe your words." The foundation establishment cultivator said coldly, "Even if Qingming and Lu Chengqi perished together and you took advantage of them, Yu Tong is also at the 4th level of qi refining like you. Yu Tong is at the late stage of the 4th level of qi refining, so it's normal for him to be able to snatch the robin birds from your hands. What's more?" At the side, Ijia said coldly, "My Huanhua sect's disciple selection only restricts the participation of cultivators at the 4th level of qi refining and above. It doesn't say that foundation establishment cultivators can't participate. If fellow Taoist Xiao wants to climb up to others, he should first think it over clearly." This. Xiaohua's pupils constricted slightly as he gritted his teeth slightly, and he stared at Yu Tong as he spoke word by word. Since fellow Taoist Yu was able to seize the robin from Junior's hands, then his cultivation is surely higher than Junior's. Junior wants to compete with fellow Taoist Yu once more to see whose methods are more formidable. Absurd. The foundation establishment cultivator slapped the jade table beside him and scolded, "Do you think my Huanhua sect's disciple selection is child's play? If it's as you say, then all the cultivators in the main hall can make up excuses to compete with Yutong. They're all at the 5th level of qi refining and above, so how can Yutong be their match? Then what was my Huanhua sect's previous disciple selection? This junior. Xiao Hua was anxious, but he didn't know what to do. Forget it. The foundation establishment cultivator sighed deeply and sat down. He said, seeing that you're eager to pursue the Tao, you're also very clever. I still lack a servant boy to tend the fire. If you're willing, I will be lenient and treat it as the selection for next year's disciple selection in advance. You can do that. The eyes of the several dozen children of aristocratic families next to him were filled with envy. This servant boy to tend the fire was admittedly an errand boy, but after all, he could approach the art of pill concocting and medicinal pills. In the future, his fated chances would also be extremely great. He could be considered a top-notch opportunity among the errand boys recruited by the Huanhua sect. Chapter 1424. A fire burner? Xiao Hua's heart stirred. Wasn't this the chance he wanted? Still not agreeing. The female disciple who hadn't spoken until now sneered, "It's rare for martial uncle to be so merciful." Still not kowtowing and thanking him. However, just as everyone was somewhat jealous and Kaizhuxia was secretly happy for Xiao Hua sneered, Junior came to the Rinsing Flowers sect to seek fairness. Junior relied on my own ability, risked my life, and obtained the robin according to your honorable sect's request, but, unexpectedly, in your honorable sect's back mountain, in front of everyone's eyes, the big bullied the small, using your honorable sect's reputation as the gambling stake. This is something I find shameful. I was robbed of my identity as a cultivation imparting disciple, not an insignificant fire burner. Since Senior can't uphold justice for Junior and give I a chance to pass the selection, then, Junior doesn't need to be a fire burner. Junior was rude. Junior will take his leave first. Xiao Hua bowed and saluted, turning around and leaving the main hall. He left behind several dozen children of influential families standing in the main hall. All of them looked at each other, their eyes brimming with amazement and confusion. Everyone had the same thought, is this still a 4th level qi condensation loose cultivator? Looking at the other jade token, which was also a 4th level qi condensation cultivator, everyone had an unimaginable feeling in their hearts. Could it be, today is an auspicious day for 4th level qi condensation cultivators? Rude child. The female disciple flew into a rage and pointed her finger. How can my Rinsing Flower sect's fairness be decided by your words alone? My Rinsing Flower sect is actually something you can come and go as you please. On the platform, the foundation building cultivator's face was also gloomy, causing Kaizhuxia's heart to be raised high as she watched from the side. She clearly understood in her heart that to Xiao Hua, what he lacked was an opportunity to become a disciple of a famous sect. As long as he had this opportunity, Xiao Hua could definitely soar to the heavens. Even if a shameful scene really did happen in the Rinsing Flower sect's back mountain just now, this fire burner was still a disciple of the Rinsing Flower sect, after all, so Xiao Hua should have the opportunity to distinguish himself. Kaizhuxia didn't know why Xiao Hua was making such an excuse. The foundation building cultivator slammed his hand on the jade table next to him and stood up from the futon. He pointed his finger and said, "That brat you." Seeing that the foundation establishment cultivator was about to get angry, a young disciple quickly ran into the hall. He was holding something in his hand and had a strange expression on his face. As he ran, he shouted, Martial Uncle Lu, the good fate token has appeared. The 99th good fate token has appeared. The foundation building cultivator originally stood up in anger, wanting to vent his anger on Xiao Hua. However, when he saw the young disciple rushing in and heard the disciples shout, the anger on his face had long disappeared. In an instant, it turned into astonishment and joy. As he flew down from the platform, he said in disbelief, "Yi Ming, really, has a good fate tablet? Good fate card?" At this moment, Xiaohua had already walked to the entrance of the hall. He saw the young disciple brushing past him and heard the disciples shout. He slightly stopped and immediately saw that the Foundation establishment cultivator's attention was focused on the so-called good fate token. His heart immediately relaxed and his feet didn't seem to stop. He quickly walked out of the hall. When the young disciple of the Huanhua sect who was holding something saw the Foundation establishment cultivator fly down, he also stopped and pushed the thing in his hand forward. He had a smile on his face as he said, "Marshal Uncle Lu, this disciple has examined it several times. If it wasn't for this disciple usually dabbling in all kinds of things in the library, it would absolutely be impossible for this disciple to be the first to see that this is the long-lost good fate token." That young disciple was standing not far from Kaizhuxia. When Kaizhuxia saw the thing in the disciple's hand clearly, a buzzing sound suddenly rang in her mind. Her mind immediately went blank. Her entire body was like a clay figurine, unable to move even a little bit. Good fate token. Good fate token. This is the legendary good fate token. Only a voice continuously shouted in Kaizhuxia's heart, I actually also have a good fate token from the Huanhua sect. The thing in the young disciple's hand was a palm-sized token. On the token, there were several clusters of bamboo that were vivid and lifelike, as if they were about to dance on the token. It was exactly the same as the token that Xiaohua gave to Kaizhuxia in Qing Fengmin's storage pouch. Let me see. The Foundation establishment cultivator landed in front of the young disciple and reached out his hand to take the token. He used his divine sense to scan it several times and then used his eyes to look at it again and again. He slightly nodded, this is indeed the legendary good fate token. That's right, Yi Ming, who is the one holding the good fate token? What is his request? Marshal Uncle Lu, the one holding the good fate token is a boy about 10 years old. His request isn't high. He just wants to enter our Huanhua sect and worship a Grand Master above the gold core stage as his master. Yi Ming smiled and said, however, this boy's cultivation is around the third layer of the qi refining stage. It seems his foundation isn't bad. Alright, you go and bring him here. I will bring him to see the sect master. The Foundation establishment cultivator waved his hand and said, the remaining 2 good fate tokens are a thorn in the sect master's heart. He's afraid that the holder of the good fate tokens will make a difficult request. After hearing this news today, he'll definitely be very happy. Yes, I'll go out now. Yi Ming cupped his hands and walked down. Marshal Uncle Lu. Yi Jia, who was next to him, interrupted at this time and asked, that little itinerant cultivator just now, Marshal Uncle Lu was in a good mood at this time. Looking at the cultivators around him, he waved his hand and said, this kind of uncultured person really doesn't know etiquette. He's only fit to be an itinerant cultivator for the rest of his life. Why should we lower ourselves to his level? But Yi Jia opened his mouth, as if wanting to say something. Who dares to believe the words of an itinerant cultivator? Even if he said it, who would dare to listen? Besides, does he dare to say it? Marshal Uncle Lu knew what Yi Jia wanted to say. He sneered and looked at the cultivators in the main hall again, saying, on the contrary, these disciples of aristocratic families need to be reminded. Don't spread the nonsense of others blindly. Yes, I understand. Yi Jia nodded and said. Alright, you can bring these disciples of aristocratic families who didn't pass the selection down. I'll wait for Yi Ming to bring that boy here. Then, I'll bring him and Yu Tong to the inner hall together. Marshal Uncle Lu waved his hand and said. When Yi Jia turned around, Marshal Uncle Lu transmitted his voice again, send a disciple out to take a look. If that itinerant cultivator hasn't gone far, Yi Jia nodded slightly and asked the disciples of aristocratic families to leave the main hall. Kaizhuxia walked at the back in a daze. She walked and stopped, as if her heart was full of hesitation. It wasn't until she was almost out of the main hall that she turned her head. Her eyes showed a trace of determination. She quickened her pace and caught up with the cultivator in front of her. Xiaohua walked out of the main hall. He cried out in his heart that he was lucky. Soon after, he asked the boy outside the hall and hurriedly went to the guest pavilion. Inside the guest pavilion, there were two cultivators standing there. One was an old man with white hair and beard. Like Xiaohua, his cultivation was at the fourth layer of qi refining. Next to him was a boy with bright eyes and white teeth. He looked very delicate and pretty. When the boy and the old man heard the footsteps, their faces showed joy. But when they saw Xiaohua's age and cultivation, they couldn't help but be stunned. Xiaohua knew these two were the cultivators who took out the good fate card. He couldn't help but take a few more glances. Seeing the vigilance in their eyes, Xiaohua didn't go up and ask for trouble. He hurriedly walked past them and left the guest pavilion. He urged his transcendence energy and flew into the air. Looking at the direction, he first slowed down. After flying for a while, he pushed his transcendence energy to the limit. After flying for about 10 li, he changed directions again and flew in the direction he and Kaizhuxia came from. He found a mountain peak and a cave, then went in. Sure enough, not long after, several disciples around the 8th layer of qi refining flew out of the guest pavilion and chased after Xiaohua. Several hours later, when the sky was dark, dozens of aristocratic family disciples came out of the guest pavilion under the lead of Yi Jia and another female disciple. The dozens of disciples' faces were filled with disappointment and joy. They all cupped their hands and saluted the Huanhua sect disciples, then flew in different directions. Kaizhuxia was among them. There were also several female cultivators beside Kaizhuxia. After flying for several li, Kaizhuxia bid farewell to those female cultivators and flew in another direction. Then, she landed on the foothills of a mountain and waited for a long time. Seeing that no one was following them, she found a cave and began to meditate. The night gradually deepened. Xiaohua sat cross-legged inside the cave. Moonstones were embedded all around the cave. In front of him, there were two identical bells, and there was also that black iron needle floating in the air. Xiaohua frowned. While looking at the small book in his hand, he formed different hand seals and sent them towards the black iron needle in the air. The black iron needle was originally quietly floating, but as Xiaohua sent out the hand seals, the black iron needle suddenly trembled. It violently shook up and down. It didn't listen to Xiaohua's hand seals at all. Huh? Why is this? Xiaohua looked at the small book and muttered to himself in astonishment, this hand seal isn't bad. Moreover, this black iron needle seems to be controlled by Foundation Establishment cultivators or Peak Qi Refinement cultivators with divine sense. Luchongqi is in the 5th layer of Qi Refinement, how can he use it freely? I'm afraid there are some tricks. As Xiaohua thought about it, he flipped through the entire booklet but didn't find anything else. Then, with a wave of his hand, he put the booklet into the space and took out Luchongqi's storage pouch. Xiaohua only took out the booklet from the storage pouch, he didn't touch anything else. Huh? I didn't expect that a loose cultivator like Luchongqi would have a lot of medicinal pills and spirit stones. Hehe, there's even a Qingyi pill, the heavens are really helping me. Xiaohua was very happy and put all these things into his space. Finally, Xiaohua took out a dark red book from his storage pouch. This book was smaller and thinner than the small book from before. Could it be some kind of cultivation technique? Xiaohua opened the booklet as he thought about it. When he finished reading the contents, he couldn't help but feel enlightened. No wonder. Luchongqi can move the black iron needles without relying on his spiritual sense, so the secret lies here. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.